本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It is Friday, November 15th, 2019. Cado's already laughing today. You're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 279. I'm your host, Austin Walker, joined by Cado, by Patrick, by Rob Zachney. We are halfway through November. We are... Yeah.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are. By the time people hear this, yes, we are.
Refuse.
I guess 31 days, right? This is November, 30 days. No, it's November, 30 days. Yeah, we're fucked. We're halfway through.
Fucking shit.
Yeah.
Start buying presents.
Yeah, you're good. You got some time.
It's not about time. It's about money.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. I thought you meant like you had to go shopping.
Yeah, no, I mean I do,
Right.
but like so that I can spread it out over multiple paychecks.
That makes sense. Yeah. How's everyone doing? And on this cold, increasingly cold winter, autumn day.
It's fucking winter.
Yeah, it's
Once
autumn.
it goes below
it was-
30, it's fucking winter.
We live in new times.
It was a high of 17 yesterday
Jesus.
out here. And I'm once again reminded of that I live in a split level home in which half of it is underground. It's not
How's
good.
that insulation
let me tell
going? No?
It doesn't matter. The insulation is the soil that is now frozen.
God. Yeah, it's getting to the point now where I'm like, so the thing with New York, we've had this conversation, I'm sure, it's just like a lot of apartments don't control their own heat. And so it's reached it. We're in the part of the winter. The thing for me where I'm like, yeah, this is winter, is when I'm uncomfortable.
You bought the
no
thing,
matter what.
right? Did you install it?
The air conditioner?
No. Oh, is that get a heater? Buy a nice heater before they're
No,
sold out.
I have heat. No. Heat.
I bet he's getting too much heat.
I'm getting
That's
too
the
much heat. In New York, you don't control the heat in the other direction, which means it's boiling from
Who
now.
controls the power?
The landlord, and it's not like the power. It's
steam.
It's steam. It's a
radiator.
It's a radiator. Yeah, it's like a
I kind
boiling
of missed steam
radiator.
heat. That was nice.
It's next to my computer, which is not it's not immediately,
Not
but it's like
immediate.
next to my desk. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And so that makes it hard to work.
a bad
and then it's just like it's just dry. It's just like I need to get a humidifier in there to get humidity in the air. Otherwise, it just dries up the whole room.
Or you
I
can-
have a humidifier. I just need to set it up.
Or you can get leaky radiators.
Or, you know what?
Get the both of them.
Best of both worlds. Yeah,
just
totally.
get some of that.
But no, it's like
humidity
it is
in
straight
there.
up the point now where I'm like, I gotta open up these windows and put some fans in the windows.
Yeah.
To bring in some cool air.
Yeah.
Which is silly. New York living.
Yep. All my windows were open yesterday, even though it was 26
Yep.
here.
Yep. It's not
And it only
efficient.
sort of works. Like part
No,
of
yeah,
your apartment
yeah.
is just freezing cold.
Yes.
And then it's still like too warm in the interior.
100%. 100%. The number one thing that was like cool when I lived in Canada was like the first time in my life that I had central AC and heating. I was like, whoa, yo, we did this? We built this shit? This shit just works like this? You can just make it a temperature in a building.
Do it.
Damn. It's wild. Couldn't be me.
In theory, you're supposed to be able to, shut the valve on radiators.
Yeah, okay.
That doesn't fucking work.
No, because like there's an exposed pipe in my room.
yeah, that's the one too. Like
And that
the
is
pipe
hot.
that is just always there.
Yeah, if I touch it, I burn my arm.
And then, like, I swear, like, if there's 100 radiators in a square block of New York City, one of them maybe works.
Yeah,
the
maybe.
valve, maybe you can
Yes.
close it.
Yes.
Otherwise, they're always on full
either
blast.
it's on full blast or it's just completely broken and
Yeah,
you're freezing.
yeah.
So, and that's the thing is at the end of the day, I would rather be, when it comes to like winter cold, I would rather the radiator work and we have to like adjust down with air and, whatever, or with like fans and whatever, than the opposite. Than it being like the times that my radiator has been broken and it is like 10 degrees out, I'm like, well, all right, catch me in bed under 30 blankets in every pair of pants I own and every, hoodie. I'm just like, pile it on. Catch me
So
like the
when I
Michelin
lived in
Man.
Wisconsin, it was our first apartment. And it was a gorgeous home, but it was in really rough condition in some key ways. Had radiator heat, which was my first time living with radiators because we'd always had central air and heating growing up. And at first, I thought the radiator heat was really cozy. It's a very different sort of heat than central air. But then like in the dead of winter in Wisconsin, and it gets so incredibly cold there. Like you're talking about when it's 17, it's winter. I don't know. Like I was given slightly harder instruction when it came to winter, but as that temperature delta increased, what started to happen was glaciers would start to form around the doors of my building. Like there was our rent basically doubled during the winter months because our house was so heat inefficient that like the radiators were just going all the time. Right. And I think they were ultimately powered by steam, powered by gas. And so everything just shot through the roof. But by the like late January, early February, you were starting to have problems like opening and closing doors.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because the ice block by the seams, the generous seams around the doorways and the door frames were starting to get so big that you were just starting to sort of like wedge. It was like a doorstop, and you just sort of had to wedge it closed. It was great.
This was that's I've had that experience.
Don't miss that.
No. Nice. Now these days we go in our warm homes, we boot up our PlayStation 4s, and I do my best to stay warm by the light and the heat of a lightsaber. We got some
lightsabers don't really emit heat. They do not. So the uncanny nature of the lightsaber is that it is not a radiating heat source. So you know it's unnaturally
That's why Luke
cold.
had to get inside that tauntaun.
This is the thing though, because the lightsaber absolutely does heat up the tauntaun.
Does it?
Han Solo takes the lightsaber, cuts open the tauntaun, revealing. So in my mind,
I always assume that
just
steam is just the
heat
heat of the interior of the tauntaun.
hitting. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that
hitting
makes
the air.
sense. Yeah. But okay, here's a question.
The blade of a lightsaber is actually a beam of plasma projected from the hilt. The beam is stabilized by a containment force field, which is also projected from the hilt, so there is no heat emitted from the blade. But that still leaves the question of how hot the plasma within
Well, like
the
if
blade.
you cut a
It's
door,
pretty hot, I bet.
This is my thought is like if you do the thing at the beginning of Phantom Menace and they cut through that door, that like blast door, and it like leaves behind and like
molten.
In episode 1, Liam Neeson used it to cut through a sort of
Thank you.
vault-looking door. Assuming it's a steel door, the melting point of steel is above 1,350 degrees Celsius. So I suppose you could peg it around 1,400 degrees Celsius.
Thank you.
Let's say it was an aluminum door, even in a galaxy far, far away. Then you would need the lightsaber to
Probably
go higher than
past steel.
660.3 degrees Celsius. Update, I just remembered from physics class the amount of heat is measured in joules or kilojoules. You'll need this formula.
But like if you touch
that wasn't
Thank you,
That was
Gary.
the wiki.
Thank you, Gary Al, producer. Bit from Quit on
Quora, yeah.
Quora?
You know what would be the best
What's that?
is like now that we're doing whatever with Star Wars.
Yeah.
What if we made Michael Mann's Thief, but Star Wars?
I'm down.
And like the ultimate heist is like, how are we going to cut through this vault door?
Can we talk about?
And they like he talks to the guy in the junkyard, and he's
that's so
"We need to
good.
get the Kyber crystals and get this lightsaber
Get this
working
fucking
again.
lightsaber.
The Jedi's dead.
Yeah.
the Jedi are
They
dead.
ordered
but if you
66, didn't you fucking hear? They killed all the damn Jedi when their lightsabers are around. If we just we gotta go to Ilum. We go to Ilum.
This will cut through anything. Unless that door's got cortosis ore in it, you don't got to worry.
And it's like, then in Act 3, of course, it reveals they replaced the door. It's okay, it's whatever. No, they got it with cortosis. Like, shit.
we got cortosis.
We got cortosis. God, actually, we're both getting that name wrong, Rob. Is it it's cortosis weave?
Cortosis ore.
Cortosis. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but you can have
Isn't
woven
that,
cortosis ore for armor.
StarCraft commentator.
God damn it. Real quick, I just want to complain about Quora or not complain, be thankful for. So years ago, for some reason, I signed up
The
for
Yahoo answers of people who think they're intellectual.
Yes, well, except that's changed, right? Like if I scroll down in my I'm looking at my phone. If I search for Quora in my email, because I got the weekly digest apparently since 2013. These are things that were like, what trivia or little known facts are interesting about Brazil, or like From a programmer's perspective, like, talk to me about this complicated thing. But these days, I swear to God, if I look at my most recent ones, it's shit like, who would win in a fight, Goku or Naruto? And I'm living. Is Eminem better than Lil Pump? Like, love it. Quora, where the smart people go to explain the phenomena of the world.
Yes, actually, now in website form.
Exactly. Why is Vegeta loved so? I swear to God, this is back-to-back weekly digests. Why is Vegeta loved so much? What if Vegeta became Super Saiyan 3 before Goku? Thank you. Finally, we're bringing. Why did Naruto name his son Boruto? How powerful is Kazakhstan? See, they still got the questions people really want to know. What's the power level? The power level of Kazakhstan? We should talk about Jedi.
Now is Boruto a good quarterback? No, he is not. But Naruto was a good quarterback.
Shout outs to Chef Lubu. Everyone go watch Chef Lubu's incredible Explaining Anime for Southerners series. Extremely good video series over on Twitter. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I'm just thinking he should do an Explaining Star Wars for Southerners. That would be very funny too.
Speaking of great quarterbacks, who have sons who maybe don't live up.
Archie Andrews from Riverdale, great quarterback, is now a Jedi also in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I played that game. I burned through that game. So I mentioned this in the Monday podcast that I played through that game in like 3 or 4 days. I was like all the way in. And I never stopped looking at that dude and going, that's Archie. That's Archie Andrews. That's Archie from Riverdale and from Archie.
I didn't watch Riverdale, and I also just felt like, motherfucker, you're not a Jedi. Come on.
Jedi,
Does he just have an Archie-ish aspect? It's not KJ Appa who's playing him, right?
I wish.
There's just an Archie-ish vibe.
Yeah. He picks up a guitar.
I'm really into Jedi shit now.
Yeah, he picks up a guitar.
Oh, that guitar.
What happened to smuggling?
Guitar bit.
I don't do smuggling anymore.
I swore he was going to commit to the guitar bit, which is the same thing I thought about Archie in the show Riverdale, and he didn't. It just disappears. He gets busy doing other shit like getting caught in underground fight pits, fighting local fauna, being attacked by local fauna, being betrayed by people who he trusts. I guess does that actually happen in this game?
Often the same people.
I am describing both Archie Andrews and Cal Kestis, the protagonist of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. A game I think I really like, with a couple of
me too.
With a couple of like buyer beware, especially on PS4. I think this game kind of runs bad. I think it has lots of seams. It's kind of
they have already sent us an email that's like performance patch incoming after launch. When we talked about Need for Speed Heat and posited would this game have benefited from 6 months, and it was like, not really. This game, would it have benefited from 6 months?
Absolutely.
Like a lot. Because the difference between the two is like this game has like a pretty clear identity.
Yep.
I think I like so much of what it's doing. I think it is going to make a lot of Star Wars fans like really happy. Given that there's kind of been a drought of like this type of like single player story focused, like you think the thing you thought would have been a home run when EA got the license, and somehow we're 5 years later and like just getting around to it.
Yep.
But it is a game that has some technical problems, has even just UI, like sort of little design stuff that you could have been ironed out in that period where, hey, we've got the whole game in front of us. What do we do from there? But all that said, I'm with you. I haven't finished it. I'm like 8-9 hours in, but I've really liked my time with it so far.
Yeah, I kind of blew through it. Which is not to say that I didn't do a lot of exploration and other stuff. And let me set up what this game is so that you can contextualize that. Third-person action game. In terms of combat, it's drawing on sort of third-person action games or action RPGs like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro. It is I do not. I think in the year that Sekiro came out, it's a hard comparison to make because this has some similarities in terms of like the enemies have stamina bars, and once you drop the stamina down, you can do damage, but you can also kind of sneak in a hit.
They do a lot of hits where they wind up from the back and are constantly trying to put you off based on the speed of their attacks because you're doing parries. But yeah, it's a game that couldn't exist without Dark Souls.
Right.
But to say it's the Dark Souls of Star Wars, I think is way too far.
Even playing on hard, like it's just not that same experience of like.
Can we talk about that bit, like how you start the game?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead? And then Rob, you have a question also. Unless Rob, is your question about this?
Well, just the question I have is just about framing. I was talking to Matthew Galt earlier today, and I was like, I'm not sure this game is for me because like I'm not really a Souls-like guy.
Oh, you should play this game.
You should probably be thinking more in a Metroid direction.
Yeah, we'll get there once we describe the combat. The bulk of what you do in this game is I guess it is equal parts combat and traversal / exploration, but like it's a lot of combat. So Patrick, go ahead and set up the difficulty thing.
Well, yeah. So I mean, a lot of games have. Well, for one, if you're saying it's the Dark Souls of Star Wars, well, if that was true, then it wouldn't have a difficulty slider, which it does. And
I'm glad it does.
It has 4 difficulty. And it's not just that. It's the way it conveys the difference between those difficulties. I forget what all 3 of them are, but like I think it's like damage received, damage, damage input, damage output.
It's not output.
And then,
it's importantly not output.
Is it?
No, yeah. They always take the same amount of damage per the reviewer's guide. It's damage. It is the 2 things are it's damage that enemies do to you, and it's the parry window. It changes.
So the parry window is the one that I think is important because that's what I ended up looking at when I was trying to figure. I was like, oh, like in hard, so you'll see as you're going through different difficulty windows, it's basically like how wide do you want that parry window to be? Yeah. And I was like, the moment that I saw that, I was like, oh, I probably want to increase this because I just went from. I'm going from Sekiro, a game in which the window is extremely tiny, where you like there is almost no window, which is the point. So it's like, oh, so that means like the gap here is probably going to be pretty wide, and so I put it at hard to try and compensate that. But it was just like an interesting way to convey, like what is core to the combat, like the parry. You can play this game without parrying and like you'll be okay, especially on easier difficulties. It's not a requirement. It's not like Sekiro where like, hey, we're gonna put up a hard wall. Like you're not gonna go forward. But I just thought it was because I'm gonna write a blog about this, just sort of breaking out. Like I think it's interesting how games convey something about themselves through difficulty, often in pejorative or like frustratingly like vague terms. But like for someone who has played this type of game, they can look at that and then get a sense of what they're actually scaling for. It's not just you take more damage. It's, oh, we're going to ask more of you physically through your fingers. And if you're new to these types of games, you know what? Blow open that parry window so you can have the feel of the parry without necessarily like, you know, having to time it with right before the attack hits you.
Totally. So that's half of this game. You're fighting Stormtroopers. Okay, so it takes place, people who know Star Wars, it takes place between episodes 3 and episode 4. Which is to say after the Clone Wars, before the rebellion kind of rises up. It takes place, it features a handful of characters, I guess maybe just one from kind of the universe, other stuff. Saul Guerrera, Forrest Whitaker's character from Rogue One, and also from was he in Rebels? Was he in Clone Wars? One of the
Rebels.
I think they ended up like after Rogue One, or was he? He was brought in. He was an animated character to begin with, and then was brought into Rogue One.
That is correct.
I think that's the line.
That is correct. I think he was in Clone Wars originally, and then Rebels.
He's a great character.
He's a great character. He's a great character who gets better the more that the more he's in stuff, because he in Rogue One he's interesting, but he's like the premise is, hey, what if there was a more radical fighter against the Empire, and maybe he's too radical. But when you see the arc of that character from what I've read about him, and every time I see like I read a comic that he shows up in, or he's in this game, right? Like there's a little bit more nuance to that character, and I think the performance here is pretty solid. So like he's there. There is.
Is it still Forrest Whitaker?
I believe so. If it's not, it's like a damn good impersonator.
It's a great impersonator.
Because I've felt the spirit of Forrest with me playing those sequences.
On the Forrest on the Forest level.
Yes, on the Forest. Yes, yeah, totally.
Order.
They showed some of that stuff at E3 too. It's Kashyyyk, which is exciting. So that is the game. You are a Jedi. You are a Jedi Padawan who is on a shitty scrap planet undercover, or like in hiding, not undercover, in hiding, because all of the Jedi have been, purged. You are, kind of pushing down your powers. You're not using any of your connection to the Force. Some shit pops off. In order to save a friend, you reveal yourself as a Force user. And the Empire, ever present, panoptic in their surveillance, dispenses a crew of Inquisitors to try to take you down. You begin to flee, and just in time, you are rescued by a crew of people with their own interests and their own histories, who are then going to kind of bring you into a larger mystery that, in order to try to create a future for the Jedi Order. Your hope is to create a future for the Jedi Order and maybe rebuild what was lost. You need to go investigate some ancient aliens. Because it's a Star Wars video game, and the thing that all Star Wars video game developers do is they go, we want there to be like a galactic mystery. What if we invented a new ancient alien species?
So that, wait, the Zeppo are not...
Excuse me?
The what?
Isn't that Zepho?
They're the Zepho, which is the worst name of any fake ancient alien species.
We've heard tell of a fourth Mark's.
Yeah. Dude, every time they say Zepho, I lose it. I like this game a lot, but the fact that they called their ancient alien race the Zepho is just so funny to me. And sometimes they'll be like,
sounds like a race of elephants.
Absolutely.
The Zepho.
The Zepho.
Wait, so the Zepho is not Star Wars canon?
No.
Okay, don't fucking roll want me to pull up a wiki entry where they explain
it's fine.
How hell works and explain Han Solo's line, get the hell out.
No,
so
I got
just
you.
let's.
Yeah, you're right.
But
this is.
I assumed that they were just tugging on existing Star Wars canon of an ancient Force sensitive civilization.
What they are tugging on is a thing that happens a lot. It did happen a lot in the expanded universe. Still happens in whatever the current contemporary side story stuff is, which is, hey, the Jedi aren't the only people to have used the Force in the history of the Force. That would be ridiculous. And so another group that shows up in this game are the Night Sisters. That is a group that did show up in Clone Wars.
Dathomir
is one of the planets on this game, Rob. You go to Dathomir.
So that's canon still.
That's still Clone Wars is still canon.
They canonized the courtship of Princess Leia, but okay. All right. Sure.
Wow. We're going to some
Rob should play this game.
I'm learning things about people on this podcast, let me tell you.
Rob is looking out the window and nodding furiously. Rob is looking out across the Massachusetts plains as if in the scene from season 3 of The Wire when Avon and Stringer are like, we got real shit, knowing that there's some dirt coming. Love it. So you're brought into this mystery. You're trying to figure out what the history of the Zepho is, because you think that if you solve that, yada, 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 the future of the Jedi Order. All the while, you're being pursued by a Sith Inquisitor, a crew of Sith Inquisitors, and you're kind of butting up against places where the Empire is either expanding or has already taken over, where there is rebellion already, or where you're kind of picking through the pieces of a place that has been turned into an Imperial base or whatever. You're fighting stormtroopers. You're fighting stormtroopers with electro sticks, with not vibra swords, but like electric shock sticks. A lot of them.
They had that. Are they just pulling the thing from, because that was introduced in Force Awakens, right? I think that specific model of stormtrooper.
Yeah, that's melee.
There's Ray land when they go to the Cantina 2.0 in Force Awakens. Yeah. I believe there's a sequence where I think maybe it's a shock trooper or something like that. I think that was a new
and they've had that style of electro staff for a long time in and off. A lot of the Inquisitors have similar electro staff type weapons. And you're fighting lots of creatures. You're fighting lots of Star Wars ass. This is a weird burrowing mole creature who wants to bite your head off. You're fighting giant spiders
who are kind of assholes. Honestly,
do you fight those fucking rams yet? Those rams beat the shit out of me, dog.
You think I got this guy?
No,
I have a lightsaber. Shouldn't my lightsaber, upon first contact,
just slice right through
this creature? No,
No, someone nerfed lightsabers in this universe. Like I don't know what. I have never seen, to use wrestling terminology, I have never seen so many people no sell a lightsaber as in this video game. Just like a regular stormtrooper one hit, they're dead. But if that stormtrooper has like a command pauldron on, that guy can take a hit. Let me tell you, it's like zip. No, you're good still. Okay.
Turns out stamina bars are extremely good
They're very
at blocking lightsaber attacks.
Yes. And animals too. Most animals take more than one lightsaber hit. Pretty much. So on top of the combat stuff, there is the traversal stuff. That is, Rob, what you talked to Galt about in terms of it being Metroid-like. It is a third-person platformer. Like there's lots of Titanfall 2 type shit, zip lines and wall running. Lots of wall running. And some Titanfall shit in the sense that the game is broken up into planets, and part of the Metroid stuff is there are doors that will open once you get certain powers, and so you do a lot of backtracking once you get powers.
You can't open this door with your lightsaber that can cut through things.
No.
But you give you a good force push, then those rocks just move right out of the way.
Those rocks. So the other things like that Titanfall 2 thing of like, oh, we're in the dungeon where you have force push now. Okay, this is the level where this mechanic is going to be important. Oh, this is the level with like the bouncy jump pods. Okay, I get it. And some of that stuff works, and some of it really didn't. I think this game overall, like, if I just want to give you like the breakdown of like, here is why I think this is good, it's part of what Patrick said already, which is Star Wars fans have not had this thing for a long time. Rob is someone who likes Star Wars the way I have liked Star Wars. Cado is someone who's wearing a Star Wars shirt right now. Like, there are beats in this game where you go like, yes, like, oh shit. Some of that stuff is purely visual. It's just a great skybox mixed with a really fantastic like shot where you're like, that is some Star Wars-ass composition. Sometimes it is a plot reveal that can feel elemental, that can feel like, yeah, of course this is true, but also because of the way that they sell it to you, because of the way the music hits, because of the framing of it, like, even though it's like a reveal you kind of expected, it still lands in a really big way. And part of it is just, I was talking to Janine Hawkins, who's freelance for the site before, Friends of the Table member Janine Hawkins, about this game, and about like, so it's 2019, and we can get in our heads about, we're very postmodern in a lot of ways, and Star Wars is not. Star Wars is like deeply structuralist. Star Wars is like, bad guys use red lightsabers, good guys use blue and green lightsabers, and then, cyan and magenta and et cetera, long story. The expanded universe of Star Wars complicates all that stuff, and contemporary writers and fans complicate all that stuff. There's always an exception. But this is a game that very much believes in those elemental truths about the Star Wars universe. And even if you're rolling your eyes when you look at them on paper, there are moments that pay off that stuff and leverage the kind of simplicity of the visual language of Star Wars in ways that is fantastic. There's a sequence early on in this game, like right away in this game, that includes the sort of like force hallucination stuff, the sort of like you're caught up in your own memories, your own fears. And they return to that a few times in the game. But even from the very first one, Patrick, I'm talking about that train sequence with like the lighting hitting you that certain way. Where suddenly,
suddenly the hallway like zips back a million miles.
It's so good. They deal with that stuff very well, and end up telling a story that is like a very, beat by beat rise of a hero story. Like, I don't love Cal Kestis, but what I do love is, as a Star Wars fan, like seeing some of this stuff rendered with the degree of like narrative quality and the sort of like
just like decent performances, and like they at least center like the rise of like the main character and one of your shipmates that you meet. Like, it is like plenty of problems with like the Jedi as an institution, but like there's an incredible trauma that these people have gone through, and the movie sort of like centers like the trauma of these people and like what they're going through, and like, so it's not this is an early not even a spoiler, but just like I forget the character's name, the woman who's on your ship.
Your like mentor. Wow, have I?
Yeah,
we should have had this conversation on Monday. I know. Seer or Ser, Cere.
Yeah, it's a C. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she is, you learn really, really early. This is not some like late game story spoiler that like she was a Jedi and went through a very traumatic experience that you learn more about through the course of the story, and purposely chose not to do what your character did, was like to just ignore the Force and just try and be like a normal person and not raise much attention to yourself. They have suppressed it. They have like chosen to no longer be a Jedi because of like the trauma that like they've gone through with the people they've been after Order 66. And like, so again, I'm not saying it's like the most like subtle story in the world, but it at least tries to center like the motivations of these characters as having like gone through extraordinary things that have led to them to this moment. And I think like gives it a little more gravity than the kind of gravity that like what you want out of like a fairly like otherwise, like light Star Wars story, like what you're here for. Like it is nice when it's given a bit of gravity. And there are some decent performances, at least for Seer, that like sort of grounded that enough that I was like, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, I see why you made that choice and you don't want to use the Force anymore.
There are some really great side characters in general. The captain,
pilot's great.
The pilot, the captain of the ship, who is just like, he is from Hoboken. He is from like North Jersey. He's got a spaceship. He's a little in debt to some syndicates because he's made some bad bets.
Don't worry about it.
It's not. It's definitely not going to catch up to us. Narrator voice.
I am very here for the meeting across the river Star Wars character.
It's so funny. You were going to love this character so much. There are a handful of other really interesting characters, but in terms of just like the beat to beat stuff and like where it works for me and where it doesn't, I think the opening third of the game and the closing third of the game are really strong. The like level design understands how to make traversal through the levels really fun. You're kind of poking at bits of the level in a sort of Dark Soulsian way of like, hey, is there something cool over here? The answer tends to be like
shortcuts.
Not really. Yeah, there are just straight up like shortcut unlocked.
but there are like there'll be like one of like the most common shortcuts is just a conveniently hanging rope on an area that you can't reach. You cut that rope and it drops down, and then the game goes shortcut unlocked. It's just like
okay,
which is like like when we're talking about like the way it tries to in some ways flattens or like forwards like in a kind of clunky way, like things that like Dark Souls just sort of passively does. The shortcuts thing is maybe my favorite one of those.
In general, you're not finding, so like in terms of like gameplay structure, you're getting XP, you're leveling up, you're unlocking new abilities, new attacks, new passive stuff like more health. Like Dark Souls, it has like a healing system where you have limited health like charges in between meditation spots, or in between your visits to a meditation spot, but the bulk of what you're like finding in the environment is just lore bits. Your character can like has like Force echo, basically can like see echoes of the past and kind of recreate them. There's another word, it's like psychometry, I think, and then the other thing you're finding is lots of like skins, lots of cosmetics, lots of like, what if the ship was this color? When I say lots of, mostly. And I have
a ship that you see like very rarely, only when you leave the ship and get on the ship. But boy, if you want it to have blue stripes,
and I feel like there's going to be I feel like there's going to be a type of player who is just deeply disappointed every time they like do a difficult puzzle, because there's some like actually challenging puzzles as the game continues in some of those side areas, and you like finish a puzzle and you're like, cool, I got a new poncho. Okay, this is an ugly poncho. I'm never going to wear this poncho. Great.
Most of the ponchos are... like it's not even like a level of customization for the character that you get to really own like their aesthetic. It's you get ponchos, and then you can like change like the detail of those ponchos. You can change like the skin of the little robot that follows you around, and the skin of the ship. And the robot is very tiny, always on your back. Yeah. You're never looking at them. And the ship is not something there's no, well, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no like flight sequences where you're like going around, and you would like appreciate. So it's like they knew, this type of game has like optional areas with secrets and puzzles and then a reward at the end. And the vast majority of those, like I have problems on two levels. One, I like doing the puzzles. So like I'll keep doing them because the satisfaction there's enough satisfaction out of the doing. It's just that the reward is wildly disproportionate. And so it's like the aesthetic stuff, not particularly satisfying. But even often the lore stuff is confusing. So like what'll happen is you'll find something, your robot will scan something, or it's a force echo or whatever, and you'll get a little bit, and then it'll like add to your index, and it's like, oh, hit option, to read more. I'm like, cool, like, oh, this is where they're gonna put like 3 pages of like a dump. It's like, no, it's just the same. It's the same line that you just saw, just put into an index that you can read there, I guess, if you want. And I found that like to be, like I was hoping that dynamic was going to be, oh, you get a hint of something interesting. Now, if you want like the Wikipedia entry, you like hit options and you'll get it. Right. And there's just none of that here. So it's just like I actually wanted way more.
I would have loved it. Give me Wikipedia. More,
like I find like Souls to be sort of like impenetrable. I appreciate that it exists. I know that folks like yourself really like the way of piecing that stuff together. But like I at least like have a context for Star Wars where I'd like to learn more about it, and then the game just sort of like bleh, like there's just nothing there for you.
It's one of those things where like I very much wish I would have loved the version of this that was that style of story, the Dark Souls style of storytelling, but in Star Wars, because this is not that either, right? Like Dark Souls at least because it has loot, there's all of this huge collection of text, like to the degree that you can print a book of all the Dark Souls item descriptions, right? Like you couldn't do that here with the little like slight one piece of dialogue you find in the echo of a place a stormtrooper shot someone once. Do you know what I mean?
And especially when they're working within the existing, like it's not like what you could start. Look, the beauty of Star Wars is like it could be anything, and yet the storytelling we always fall on is just like the struggle between the Resistance and the Empire, which is just like really tired and boring. But like Star Wars could literally be anything you wanted, even if that like was in the backdrop. See, I mean, there's not like a reason they couldn't have just like you're in a star system or whatever that has like completely separated from this, but there's a Jedi mystery at the core of it. But then that would have allowed them to like be a little more expressive in that regard, and maybe found other ways to tease that lore.
Totally.
But I mean,
by and large,
as a first crack, I think they do a lot more right than wrong.
Yeah, the one thing that is like really the one thing that makes this hard to recommend, besides the performance stuff, because I do hope that performance stuff is fixed. If I was playing on PC, my guess is I would have been able to brute force it because I happen to have thankfully have a decent PC.
The frame rate is not great
even on performance mode.
PS4 Pro,
even on performance mode on PS4 Pro, it's bad because it's not. Yeah. It's the frame rate isn't bad in the sense that like it struggles to keep up with the action. It's like it's stuttery because it's loading things in, is what it feels like. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of that. Like there's a lot of
because there'll be sequence where you'll clearly hit like the level break. Yeah. And it's like, I'll like jump up on a platform my character is climbing and then pause.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not long, but it's like a full 3 to 5, like a long 3 to 5 seconds as it loads in the area. And I buy your theory that explains a lot of the other performance issues. Cause it's not consistent with like, there'll be times where like I'm fighting 8 enemies at once and the frame rate is
totally
rock
fine,
solid,
100% fine.
Like it's great.
But if I get into
I'll just be like wandering along and then all of a sudden, do.
Yeah, those stutters are really, really frustrating. But again, I think that I hope that those get fixed. Also, there's like the Unreal Engine like texture pop in that I haven't seen this bad since Mass Effect 1. Like that style of like, is there a wall here? What am I? Oh, okay, it's a grate. I can climb that grate. Okay, I see. The stuff that is actually frustrating and the stuff that I think a lot of people might struggle with is the middle act of this game has a couple of levels where you don't have all your traversal powers yet. So maybe you could run on walls and do force push, but you can't do force pull. You can't you can zip down zip lines. You can't zip up zip lines. And the level design is just labyrinthine, and you never quite know if you're on a path you want to go down. It has like the great sin of this style of game, which is it will close a door behind you that you can't reopen, which means you never know if you're including like the worst one, Patrick, you hit last night, you told me, is there's an elevator. There's a sequence where you get to a place where there are these 3 big elevators at the bottom of a level basically, and one of them leads you to the next step. The other 2 lead you to other directions, and 2 of them will not go back down after you've taken them up, and so you have to rework your way through the level to get back down to where you were. And if you hit a checkpoint and rest, that means that the enemies respawn, so you have to fight your way back down through the level. And it's like, that's not... I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And there's no fast travel.
There's no fast travel. Right.
They don't let you, for reasons I can't quite grasp, other than, you mentioned maybe like you could skip story beats, but like...
I think, there's a specific thing that happens. So it's a game where it's like you go through you think about each level as like a dungeon. You get to the end of the dungeon, you get your new power, and a lot of times the tutorialization of that power is working your way back out from the basement, so to speak, of this dungeon. It's like, oh, I got force push. Now I'm going to work my way out. I'm going to fight people. There's new enemy placements. There's opportunities for me to use the power to like force push open walls and solve a few extra puzzles. And they don't want me getting it and then be like, all right, I'll see you at the ship. Peace. I get it, but they should just turn off the fast travel to certain places. Do you know what I mean? In those moments.
Yeah, just say like, your connection to the force is weak right now. Like, give me the generic.
Bloodborne will just turn off lanterns. Like, just says, okay, you can't travel there right now. And that's fine. It's totally fine to do that.
Because it becomes like really frustrating when it's a game, it's a Metroid style game in which you are so deeply encouraged to, and actually I like what one of the things this game does is that you enter an area, you pull up your map. I don't like the map at all. I find it confusing, and I wish it just had at the point that I'm doing maps and it's surfacing parts of Dark Souls that Souls keeps like quiet. Like, just let me set waypoints. That would actually like solve a lot of the problems I had. Was like when I was trying to get back to where I was telling you about, I went down 2 different paths and it was wrong. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's not where I was supposed to go, because it's not. The world is structured, like you said, a labyrinth. It's really not meant for you to internalize it. You're meant to kind of just get lost in it, and it was just really frustrating that I wasn't able to just get back to where I wanted to go, because what the map does is like you'll enter an area, and as soon as you fill in the area, even if you haven't encountered like a wall that you can't interact with yet because you don't have a power, pull up that map and it just says red. It just says you cannot do this yet. And then when you get that power, it turns green and says you can do something with this now. And so then it's cool when you get a new power, look at a map and it's like green, 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 green.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing what the rub is gonna be, okay, one, as I get further in the game, is that I'm basically gambling on the puzzles being interesting, because I know it's at the end of whatever those secrets are not gonna be particularly satisfying. Yep. But that means then I also have to account for the journey to get there, because even though I can see a meditation spot right in front of where that thing is, I can't go to that. I got to fly to the area, and I'm going to have to spend 5 to 10 minutes navigating my way there. Yeah. And I may not have been to that planet in 6 hours, so I don't really remember the optimal path there. Yeah. And so
the thing that ends up happening is, thank God, you get enough traversal power. Like, so that moment that you're in right now, you messaged me again about a place where you're like, hey, is this whole area a new area I can go to on this fucking planet? What is happening? And like, yes, and in that moment, I felt very overwhelmed, being like, well, now I want to stay here and finish all this stuff. Stay on the critical path is what I'm going to say to people playing this. Like, do the stuff, go from mission to mission, stay like on where your core quest like marker is, because eventually you're going to unlock all of these traversal powers that when you finally return to those places in the final act, you're going to be able to move through them much more quickly, partially because you almost always unlock a final like secret shortcut at the end of every level that lets you get deep into it pretty quickly after you've done your first pass of the level. And then second, because once you have the ability to go up a zip line, the ability to force pull down bridges, all of that stuff, a lot of that bad traversal in the middle of the game is just like it's abrasive. You're like rubbing up against it. You're like, I just want to get to the place quicker. That stuff just like disappears because you can move through the levels backwards. Do you know what I mean? And it's just not
there's
good.
Also there's a little bit of weirdness for like so the moment you're speaking to, which is actually like a really cool moment, is like you do one of the early planets, a snowy planet. You do a 2-hour like main quest line. And then you think, cool, like I've done this planet. Like there's a couple secrets I haven't done. Maybe I'll revisit it later, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to move on to the next thing. And then like you come back and actually like the planet has shifted a little bit because of something you did. And it opens branching paths that are like it's the level is 2 to 3 times the size that it was when you'd internalize what you thought it was. And it's a really cool moment, but it's weird because yes, you can access it, but the game doesn't really want you to. Right. And what I mean by that is without spoiling like the areas I found, like there's like an ice cave area, and that ice cave area leads out to like a crashed ship area. You can explore those, and then you run up against walls, which are like, the arbitrary, like your robot can't interact with this thing. Yeah. But so now I've gone far enough. So I left. Now I've gone far enough the story where they're like, "Hey, let's go back there." And I'm like, "Okay," and I do that. And now there are dialogue bits as though I have not been to this area before. So the character is now commenting on an area that I have clearly been to, and the game gave me access to, but just not full access. Yeah. But then it's having lines where it's like, "Woo, we're going down." Like, why would they put these big ice slides here? And it's like, buddy, like we went down these ice slides like 15 times when we were exploring this area before. So it's like stuff like that where I don't think that would have been figured out in, like if they gave him a 6-month delay, that's more of like a sequel thing when they, you sit down and figure out like,
even in this game,
how did we structure this? How would we do it differently?
And they learned that, right? I think by the end of this game, the final act where you revisit some of these planets, the sections you revisit are all very cool. The final bit is fantastic. Like, Patrick, I'm so excited for you to finish this game. I've been messaging with Brad Shoemaker, one of the bigger Star Wars fans I know. I'm so excited for him to hit some of the late game stuff here, because as someone who loves this particular style of Star Wars game, like, he is going to lose his shit at some of the stuff that happens. Rob,
oh, wow.
I want you to play this
that makes me excited
because of the way that they deliver the final act stuff. Like, do your best to avoid spoilers on it. Like,
oh, I will.
Like there are a couple of beats that are like, yo, and that is extremely good. And I like
that's exciting. That's cool. Because like, when's the last time we've said that about a goddamn Star Wars?
A long time. And like, there are moments there that are just they frankly realize that they're not as good at making open world stuff, and it's okay to make a more linear action level with a degree of like, hey, how do you want to go about that action? How do you want to? I mean, the other half of this is you get all your by the time you get all your powers, and they're able to like create fights around that where you're like, whew, okay, like you're gonna keep fucking sending stuff at me, but I can now force push 5 people off the cliff, or I can like pull someone right to me and just catch them with the lightsaber. Once you get all that stuff going, and also some of the better passive upgrades are just like, there's here's my big suggestion. There's a late game upgrade that says every time you heal, you get your full force meter back. Get that upgrade as soon as you can.
Are you kidding me?
It's so good. Ooh. It's so good.
The loop there would be just ridiculous.
It's so good.
At a certain point.
So good. And that is like, and you still have limited heals, right? But it's like, you do get that feeling of like, boom, boom, da 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 da, and like that ends up feeling really fantastic.
How many did you have by the end?
7, I want to say, which is a lot.
Okay, so I've got you get a couple really early. Yes. I've had 4 for a while, and you start with 1,
I think
2.
1 or 2. It must be 2. Maybe
I think it's 2, and then I found like 2 upgrades like fairly quickly. Like
those are the best upgrades you find. Also, obviously, those are also hidden on the end of side paths. So you don't know, or am I going to get a new poncho color, or am I going to get an extra healing stim that lets me heal more times between every meditation?
Well, I think those are usually hidden in the game structures. It says this in the map, so it says like there's an exploration percentage, and then there are crates. I forget the terminology it uses, but let's just say crates, because that's what a lot of things are hidden in. And then there are secrets.
Right.
And secrets usually involve a puzzle that has to be solved. Crates are usually, they can involve puzzles, but traditionally it's more just like, what do I have to jump on in the environment to get to where I'm going? And the secrets, if you can find them, are usually one of the most satisfying puzzles in the game because they're traditionally pretty elaborate. And they also tend to be the ones that are hiding like, collect 3 of these and your health goes up. Collect 2 of these and your force goes up. And then also the stim upgrades, which are your health grades. So 7's actually pretty low, because if I hit 4, then that's like
pretty significant. And
I
may have missed a couple of them, but you're pretty far in the game at this point. Like, it is not I blew through it. I want to say I probably put 20 hours in, something like that. Maybe 15, 20, somewhere in there. But yeah, that final act is fantastic. Like they understand it's from the point I think you return to one of the planets and you do a whole new thing there. It's kind of like your second round across 3 planets and then a final zone. All really, really strong. They get better about signaling when you should divert from the path, where there is a real puzzle versus just like a nothing little side thing. And that stuff is all just better. Like in general, I think that they find their footing, and it might be like different level designers. That might be those levels are much more tight than the big sprawling middle ones. But for real, like I'm so excited for Star Wars fans to get to some of the end game beats. I don't want to oversell them. Like I want to be 100% clear. This is not like, and now my understanding of Star Wars is different so much as like.
Well, the bar is pretty low.
I know.
Also,
yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like I don't think we're holding this, like praising the parts of the game we're praising are because the bar for this type of storytelling is both low and also just it's been a long time since someone's took a real swing at one of these. Like I don't consider like the campaign in Battlefront 2 to be like
a dedicated,
take the table scraps, but it's not what people were looking for when they thought someone like EA was signing on to make these games. But that's still encouraging. That's still encouraging. We should talk about the combat a little bit, at least, because it is Soulsy in the sense that I think you mentioned up front. There is an emphasis on parrying, but it is not a requirement, right? So it's more in the realm of Dark Souls, where it's like, yeah, like if you learn to do parrying, your life's going to be easier, but you can also manage your stamina, manage your force powers, and just kind of spam and block your way through. But there are going to be sequences where you're like advantage, right? So like there's the robot from Rogue One is like one of the main sort of like kind of like Sentinel type characters where it's like, it's not an easy stormtrooper, but it's not like a huge boss fight. That's kind of in between. And that like that one is like uniquely weak to parrying. And so he hits you with kind of like these big strong swings. And if you just parry one of those, he just kind of gets like on the fritz for, 2 to 3 seconds where you can get in some good hits. And so you don't need to do that. Like you don't have to. I think it's satisfying enough. Like, and it is like cool to like be in a Star Wars game and like instead of block to parry something. But if like if part of your worry is like, I don't like Souls games, everyone keeps calling this like a Dark Souls influenced game. Like you're good. Like you're fine. Like I don't think that
it is an action.
It's an action game. It's not particularly. It's not easy, but also it's not hard. And I think you can scale it appropriately with the difficulty levels. But it's not. You also don't die at the pace that you do in a Souls game.
Yeah.
It's probably you die faster than you would in like if you were to remove some of those elements
or something. You know what I mean? A past Star Wars action game.
Yeah.
But it's not.
But it's way closer to the Force Unleashed than it is to Dark Souls in that regard. Like you're not going to turn a corner and get like one-shotted by like a big skeleton with a sword.
But that would be
or
sick,
something
though.
like that.
Add more.
Well, there are a couple of moments like that, right?
Sword.
I told you about the.
Yeah. There's an enemy type.
There is there's an enemy type that is like, damn, like I got goosebumps because we've talked about like, oh man, what if From made a Star Wars game? And this game gets you guys as close as you're gonna get in the moment, and it's this big, like sort of a golem type character. It's a big stone guardian that is in like one of these Jedi temples, and he, you walk in the room and he's just staring at you from the other side, and you're like, oh man, I know when I get close, like my boy is coming online and he's gonna start swinging, and you get close and like his core comes up, and his head comes up and he's just boom. Boom, and his swings are just so slow, but if he knocked you, that it just knocks the shit out of you, takes like 3/4 of your health. And it was just like to do that with a lightsaber was just cool. It was just cool as hell. I was like, this specific moment was like, this is what I wanted out of like their particular pitch for this game, and it does just enough of that I would definitely recommend people play it.
Cado, did you fight one of those things during the demo run? Yeah,
absolutely. Got fucked up.
Yep, they will fuck you up.
Well, I also kept trying to parry things that were not parryable, but it was exciting once I actually got the hang of it. Like the dodge actually feels better than I don't know. Like it has like a good amount of iframes in the demo where like I should have gotten hit, but like I got lucky, things like that.
The force is with you.
Yeah,
You know
exactly,
what I mean?
exactly. It felt like skid, like a graze rather than like that's wonky, right? But it still felt cool. And yeah, even though those big ones like they have like a lot of wind up, it would still catch me sometimes.
Sometimes there's too much wind up on something, and I parry too early.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Throws me off. Throws me off.
Well, yeah, like those shock troopers will have.
Oh my god!
I think I know specifically the swing you're talking about is where they bring it behind their back, and it usually like the overhead attacks are like bring it back, pause a moment, bring it forward, and like you understand like the momentum that you're dealing with. This one and this is like the delight of games like this that play with your expectations when they do enemy design. That like is that tug and pull with the player is like it hesitates for just a bit more, so you tap it and then whoom, he comes over and just bashes you in the head. Oh, also, this game is not particularly funny in its main storyline, but it does have its moments of humor that have had me fucking cackling. Where as you enter a room, like the idle chatter from like the different characters, so, like
stormtroopers are just the
stormtroopers are fucking hilarious because like you go in the room, there's like sick, and they're like, we got it, guys. Like we're gonna like they'll say these like we're gonna be the one. This is this is our time, and then you'll start taking them out, and then like the arc of their confidence. Is just undercut where you'll get down to one and you're just like, oh boy, all right, come on, buddy, you got this.
It's just me now, me and you, okay.
It's just so precious where you just want to stop and go, buddy, like,
drop your gun.
Force Awakens is later in this timeline, but you can take this off and like just go.
Yeah.
Like I won't say nothing.
I won't say shit. I mean, you also just get the good stuff of like you wandering through a place where there's a bunch of stormtroopers who have set up shop and are debating like which one of them has to go fight the giant fire beetle or whatever. Like, no, I'm not. You know what? I'm not going to do it. I think you should do it this time. I fought the last 3. I'm sick of it. And like that style of like idle chatter between them is a lot of that stuff is very funny.
Should we call this in? According to protocol, I actually don't think we should. Yeah, better follow protocol. Better not call it in. And like,
they're good.
It's they do a thing that like The Force Awakens did this like a little bit. Like there's that sequence where with Kylo Ren and Rey, where Rey escapes and then he flips out in the chamber that he was keeping her, and then like 2 stormtroopers come around, see him like having a tantrum, and just look at each other and go away. It's like one of my favorite like bits in all of Star Wars, and this movie or this game doesn't have a lot of that in like the through line, but like has a lot of that. Has a lot of fun with the stormtroopers and like the uniqueness of their scenario where they are just like cannon fodder for these fucking Jedi, and it's good. It's really really funny.
It is really good.
I also love that also kind of will sometimes carry through. At least I noticed like one bit where like after things popped off, like that really confident one was still really confident. Like would actually have a couple barks every once in a while of like trying to like, yeah, you still got it.
We're still doing it. We're still in this one. Yeah,
Totally.
So good.
Hey, buddy, I'll see you after the next meditation.
Yeah.
That's not a line, but I also was like, that's one of the. I love I get the game doesn't even.
There's nothing.
Does not even attempt to explain. For a game, for a universe in which fucking they call bathrooms refreshers. You can look up why Han Solo says hell and some fans backfill like how that could work. There is not any attempt made to explain why when you meditate, all the enemies come back. Nothing, not a single. And sure, I guess maybe they realize like, you know what, like there's really not a good explanation for that. Let's just let the player accept it at face value, which is fine. But for a game that was otherwise kind of like, I could have used a humorous line that just sort of like poked fun at the meta-ness of, or poked fun of it in a meta way, because it is a little goofy. But it's
have him talk to Seer and be like, it was as if I'd gone through the same experience twice, and she'd be like, oh, you have weird force thing where like you can see the future and it feels like you're going through it, but actually only the last time you go through it is the real time. You know what I mean? Just say some shit.
That's good. Yeah, there you go. Hey, take that. You know what? Respawn.
Respawn.
Please.
That's yours. It's a gift. That's called world building. Yeah, great. I'm happy with it.
A new memoir by Austin Walker.
I feel like this is such a good like foundation. I want to see another one of these games. Whether I don't see Respawn do another Star Wars game. I would honestly love to see Respawn take a shot at a Star Wars game that was not about Jedi. But the fact that it's called Jedi: Fallen Order means that the next one is going to be Jedi 2, whatever. And I like Jedi stories. I think the Jedi are interesting. I think, whatever you think about the Jedi Order, they're an integral part of Star Wars, and there's lots of stories to be told there. But I also really like stories about the scoundrels of this universe, about, the bounty hunters, about all the other things in the world. And there's some of that stuff here. There's enough of that stuff here that's like flavor. But there's not like, you're playing the Jedi. You're playing the Jedi refuses the call. You're doing the hero's journey shit. And some of my favorite Star Wars stuff is the stuff that moves away from that. And so I would love for us to get back to an era where you have more of that stuff. And I know I'm saying this, by the time you listen to this, 2 episodes of The Mandalorian are out. So we're stepping towards that.
Right.
I have not seen either of those yet. I'm waiting for the second one to drop before I watch. I want to see both of them because I heard the first one's interesting but dry. But I want to move back into that world.
That's accurate.
So good. Hats off to Respawn. Try to push through the middle chapters of that game as they get a little frustrating because I promise the payoff is really, really good. So,
but yeah, as someone that went off the critical path, I would echo your desire, because the game is structured in a sense that hey man, go look around. It's look around in the areas that the game is saying look around.
Yeah.
But when you get a hint of there's another area to explore,
there's nothing
the message I sent to you was that's what I said was I found something where the reveal of what you found it was it's an incredible visual, and I was dude, I just found this shit by poking around. Is this game also have the boldness to do what From Software does and have completely optional skippable areas that hold really cool stuff? And your response was absolutely not.
We'll come back to this.
You'll come back.
And
to
so
this.
just know that you won't miss anything. You'll come back to it, as it sounds more properly equipped to. There are still structural frustrations in it, but that a lot of that sounds will be softened by having just a more ability,
more robust set of
spec'd out
tools.
character.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, no classes. You don't have to worry about skills that you're picking.
No items.
You
No
just
loot.
Just
No loot at all.
fill it in.
No
Fill it in.
items,
Fill
no
it in.
consumables. No,
Right.
consumable health, and that is it.
Right.
Got
your Estus flask.
You get your
That's
Estus flask. You have your force meter, which you recover
Right.
by doing damage to enemies. It's an action game. It is a third-person action game with some adventure elements. The Metroid-y stuff is okay, but because it's not essential, it never feels as good to me as I wanted it to. But I still think it's generally by the end of that game, I really, really stepped away from it feeling good. So I'm excited.
I just wish the Metroid-y stuff wasn't so obvious, right? Where it's it's give me just some weird equipment to use in this, you know what I mean? As opposed to just rocks push with, you know what I mean? It's just it takes the low-hanging fruit, which I guess in a sequel, you'd be less likely to do, or maybe done in a smarter way or more creative way. But yeah, some of that stuff was I appreciate the obviousness in the map, because it was just nice to know where I should go and what to do, for efficiency's sake. But yeah, it was just sort of a little goofy. I would have appreciated a little more creative ingenuity and how they decided to hide that stuff.
Definitely.
But, yeah.
All right, let's take a break and then talk about something that isn't Star Wars. We will be right back. All right. Rob, you just put up a review yesterday of a tactics game that I have always heard of the series as being positive, or I've always heard good things about it, but I've never checked in on it because I feel like I had the wrong impression until I read until I talked to you about the first game, and now looking at the second one, I feel very similarly, which is like I should make time for this. And I'm talking about Unity of Command 2, which just came out this month?
This week.
This week, okay. Tell me about Unity of Command 2, a game that visually looks like a capital S strategy game, but which you compared to me which you described to me by comparing it to Into the Breach, a much, much smaller scale tactics game.
Yeah, I think it's funny you saying that, because Unity of Command and Unity of Command 2, I think, are both trying to look friendly and approachable in a way that it's interesting in war game circles.
You're right.
Like, the mark of seriousness is like, where are my NATO counters at?
Yeah.
Does this thing look like an Avalon Hill board game, like digitized? And so Unity of Command is going for a very welcoming look, but I think to people outside war games, it still really communicates like, yo, this is wargaming.
Yes.
But Unity of Command 2 is really interesting in a couple ways. Sort of my review centers on this. Unity of Command 1 was so stripped down. It was one of those games that continually surprises you because you're never certain how they crammed so much possibility and how many surprises into a game where everything is right there on the surface, right? There's nothing hidden. Right. There are, like, in terms of actions you can take, units can move or they can launch attacks. Usually attacks will consume all their movement, so you have to be careful about doing that. But that was a game where, despite a complete lack of concealed information, you were still constantly being caught flat-footed by the way the AI would sort of find avenues to cut off your advance. You sort of surprise yourself by realizing that what looked like a really impenetrable position without doing a lot of fighting actually had a hidden weakness that if you created the right series of actions, you would basically unlock the position and devastate it without fighting. Into the Breach is a point of comparison, I think. And at this point, I'm just throwing down Austin bait because I want you to play the series. Chess Problems is another analogy
okay. Sure.
to this.
I mean, the thing you just described, the like, hey, this looks impenetrable, but there is some weakness here that you need to locate. That is very much a chess problem, like
right, where it's like, oh, you like it looks like you're moving laterally to the problem, but you are going to compel a series of moves where now you know exactly what can happen, and it will solve the entire problem. Unity of Command 1 was entirely about the Eastern Front, and it had two expansions. One focused on the initial invasion of the Soviet Union by Germany, and the other was called The Red Turn, which was about Soviet counterattacks in the winter of 1943, I want to say. Reason I'm bringing that up is because all the German-focused stuff was all about like blitzkrieg tactics and encirclement. And the Red Turn expansion put a lot of people off because it was very much about the Soviet style of fighting, where you're dealing with a really competent German army that can do a lot of really nasty counterattacks, and there's not really a lot of elegant solutions available to you. You kind of have to use brute force, but you have to use brute force cleverly, right? You're going to have to consume your strength to win, but there are smart ways to do that and dumb ways to do that. And that felt so counter to everything else that Unity of Command taught you in its initial game and in the Barbarossa expansion that it was really frustrating. Unity of Command 2 moves the action to the Western theater. So Allied invasion of North Africa, Sicily, Italy, the liberation of Western Europe, D-Day stuff. And the big difference is those campaigns pretty much always have the Germans on the defensive and always have the Allied side at a pretty decent like material advantage, but also you are attacking into really tough terrain. So like in the Eastern Front scenarios in Unity of Command 1, terrain isn't really an obstacle. Like flat steps are kind of transparent to tanks, right? Unless it's been raining and they've turned to mud, Basically, terrain doesn't exist except insofar as there's like river crossings and a very few hills. That's not true of Italy, right? Like, once you get a bunch of Germans dug in on a mountainside, you're fucked. And I was never sure how they would figure out how to make like unity of command adapt itself to that, but they really did. And I think their approach was to make a game that was almost analogous to like fighting games in some ways. It is all about like combinations of moves. It is all about using one unit to set up another to take an action. And so rather than it being about you trying to find the secret passage through the map, it is very much about you trying to figure out the correct way to set up your forces to crack a position without taking absolutely murderous losses. And so that becomes a lot of, you have to think like both a few moves ahead within a turn, but also you have to think a couple turns ahead, because you have to be thinking about how am I going to position my troops for the next turn? Like they need, because there's a lot of actions that you can only take before you move. So
like, how do I get them into place, basically thinking ahead?
Right, because like a big part of this is these are battles that almost unfold like set pieces, right? You have to, the artillery has to go first. There has to be a feint attack here, and then the real attack can go. But all those pieces need to work in harmony.
Right.
And that requires pre-positioning your forces. So Unity of Command 2 has a lot more buttons to push, is the only way I can describe it. Like, you have to do a lot more thinking about, okay, I'm going to use a feint attack here. I'm going to use an artillery bombardment from these guys, and then hopefully I'll get an overrun attack with an armored unit. But all of that is pretty self-explanatory, and the thing that I didn't anticipate was that it, in some ways, takes actions that would just sort of happen in Unity of Command 1, and now there's a button you can push to be like, I want to do this. I want to constrain this action in this way to achieve these results. And in some ways, I think that makes it more intelligible because you don't have dice rolls basically blowing up in your face where you may have made the right move, you just got unlucky and you got completely demolished. That happens less in Unity of Command 2. And so you quickly realize it's much more about thinking about procedure. Like, what is the correct turn order? What is the exact series of steps I need to do to solve this scenario? And the scenarios are really good. Like, you'll feel good about like the solutions you come up with on the first playthrough.
What are those scenarios? Like, how am I stepping through a bunch of pre-generated scenarios? Is there some sort of meta structure to the campaign? What is like generating those scenarios, if that makes sense?
Yeah, they're all historically based. They're sort of following along from the closing stages of the North African campaign all the way through the invasion of Germany from the West.
Okay.
And what those scenarios look like, for instance, is you will have a series of scenarios set in Italy covering the Allied drive up the Italian peninsula. And so some of the scenarios will overlap. They will reuse portions of the map. But like in one scenario, Rome is this distant target in the far north of the map, and you probably aren't going to get there. But in the next scenario, now it's entirely about taking Rome, except Rome is also flanked by a really deadly mountain range, and so you can't really flank it until you drive the Germans out of this mountain range. So how do you do that? And that's kind of what you're doing for a lot of this game is following these steps. You're looking at these historical battles and dealing with some of the limitations that crop up in some of the historical accounts. But like the scenarios are preset. They're not randomly generated, which is where the Into the Breach comparison does falter. These are set problems for you to work through.
Right.
But they're very good problems.
Cool. It's one of those things where it's like, I need to sit down and spend a few hours getting over the hurdle of like, hey, this is a UI I have not used before, so that I can see it, if that makes sense. like, I mean, I think that this is true for most tactics games, but I feel like in the post XCOM world, there's been a real push towards like a certain sort of similarity across tactics games that have a broad audience base in mind. We're like, okay, here are some like key visual ideas that you'll be able to pick up pretty quickly if you know what a tactics game looks like. And what I will say is like I think you're totally right that Unity of Command 2 is certainly visually more is hitting broader than a traditional war game. Like, you're right, it is not little black counters on a board and just hexes. It is images of the units, which is definitely something that's like more like, oh hey, I can visualize this space. But I also look at some of these cards and I see them and I go like, oh, like these types of cards are are from a history of wargaming with these like color blocks plus like text about how these abilities work, stuff like that. And it's not that it's off-putting for me. It's just like, all right, I need to spend the time to like just get in there, start playing around, and getting to the point where I can do what you just did, which is like tell a story about what these mechanics are doing. But that just takes time.
I think there's some things that, in terms of the ways the game phrases some ideas, like the fact that you have a hand of cards that are special abilities, they don't really make any sense as cards, right? They're like one-off, like special use powers, but like they don't feel like cards in a weird way, right? It feels like resources you have on tap, but you don't interact with them regularly enough. This isn't a hand you're consulting very often. Mm-hmm. It's just a thing that you get to buy at regular, like between campaign chapters.
Got you.
And so like there's parts of that. Some of the buttons on the UI are trying to communicate something about the action you're taking, but like they just don't. Like the little art on the button doesn't really tell you anything. Like for instance, for feint attacks, it's a little thumbtack. Okay. And you realize what it's trying to say is you're pinning troops down, right? Like with the feint attack, what you're doing is you're pinning someone to the board, basically. But
that's like a very like idiosyncratic way of saying that. It's clever. I get the pun, or like I get it. But it's not, that doesn't say it to me out the gate,
Yeah, so until basically you've internalized what tooltips are going to pop up when you mouse over something, it doesn't make that kind of sense. But the flip side of that is, you brought up XCOM.
Yeah.
This game is so much more intelligible than XCOM, though. That's the weird thing, is like, XCOM, you can play it a fair bit, and it still feels like bits of it are opaque. Like, you are still like, what the fuck just happened? Why did that happen? Why did that action not work? I thought that action was going to work. The guy didn't do the thing that the button said he would do. That never happens in Unity of Command. And part of that is because Unity of Command, wherever possible, eliminates probability as a major factor.
Right. Okay.
And
that makes sense.
So,
it's like, hey, it's
so
deterministic.
The weird thing is like, it's like this game in a lot of ways is easier to wrap your head around than XCOM, which I think is funny. Huh. Like ultimately, this is why I sort of recommend it to people who are tactics curious and into tactics games, but not necessarily war games. This is considerably more straightforward than a lot of tactics games that have been inspired by XCOM have turned out being.
Okay. That's interesting. It is it's one of those things that is just about theming, and like, I've always been critical of my own, like, I have to be in a certain mode to be like, all right, I'm going to play a World War II tactics game, or I'm going to play a World War II strategy game, which is also true about all theming that is not my favorite theming. And that has always been an interesting and weird dilemma for me as a critic of like, all right, I actually think about this. I think about this with something like racing games a lot, where it's like, I don't have a lot of fondness. I like racing games, but I don't have a lot of fondness for cars in my day-to-day life, which means that like when I get assigned a review like Project Cars, it's like, all right, I need to get over the hurdle of me not having a natural affinity for this thing and begin to engage with it at that second level. And it can be very easy to be lazy about games and be like, I'm only going to play things that I naturally click with because that I naturally click with at this like very surface level, because I know that everything you described is a game that I will click with if I give it the time. But it's one of those soft priority things where like, okay, yeah, I'll add it to the list, but it's going to be in the list with a bunch of other things that are just so much easier for me to dip a toe into. Oh, I really want to go back and put more time into Disco Elysium. Like, oh, I just reinstalled Pathologic 2, and like the aesthetic to that like really, really speaks to me. I want to put some time into that. And so it can be really hard for me to get over that hump and into the space where like I'm excited. I mean, we had this discussion this year with another strategy game that I think has bad theming, which I've now forgotten the name of it. It just has an expansion coming out soon too. Why am I blanking on this, Rob? Sci-fi. Planetfall. Yeah, Planetfall. Age of Wonders Planetfall, which you described as a really, really great game, and a game I think I will like. And even though it's sci-fi, which is generally a sort of theming I like a lot, it's the world design and character design spoke to me so badly that I was like, I'm not going to prioritize this as a player, and that is a shame. And it's like always a thing I'm working on with myself. I'm like trying to like tighten those screws and like force myself to step outside of my own interest, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it's interesting you mention that, because I do think that ends up being a hurdle for Unity of Command. There are things about these scenarios that suggest themselves to me, because I don't know the Italian campaign that well, but I know enough to know that, for instance, when the Anzio scenario comes up, I'm aware that is a tough problem. Like, Anzio basically is like the Allies are trying to advance up the Italian peninsula. They hit a block as the Germans basically straddle the peninsula. And then they get the idea, well, what if we just sail around the German lines and land a tiny force behind them and roll them all up? And the entire thing gets fucked. Because they don't send enough guys. They're too tentative once they land. And so the Anzio beachhead, instead of cutting anyone off, ends up cut off and just it's so densely packed that it just turns into a charnel house as Allied troops are trapped on this beach. And Germans just bombard the shit out of them. I know that history going in, so that when that scenario pops, I understand, like, here is the trap in the scenario. Here is the disaster I need to avoid. Where this game does let itself down a little bit is it doesn't help you see that. Like, mechanically, it'll become obvious that this is the dilemma you're in. But there's nothing in the mission briefings, there's nothing to, like, in terms of flavor, to explain to you what the problem you're facing is. And it's very easy to imagine a game of this, like, where if it's just reskinned, right? It's like, oh, it's a fantasy war. It's very easy to imagine one where, like, instead of Germans, you're dealing with dwarves just, like, retreating deeper into their mountain holdfasts.
Sure.
And you have to kill these fucking dwarves. It's very easy to imagine each of these scenarios being prefaced by, like, here are the dynamics at play. Here are the problems you need to solve. Unity of Command, as elegant as the system is, never pauses and says, oh, you know what the story is, right? You're up to speed.
You know about the Italian campaign. Right.
Yeah, it assumes you know that. And so as welcoming as it is, it doesn't do any of the shit that, like, a lot of fantasy games or sci-fi games have to do, which is via theme, via narrative, unpack for you the problem you're facing.
Right. It's like spotlights. Those games will spotlight what is interesting about a scenario. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'm going to add to the list of things you've recommended to me this year, and I'm going to start working through that list as we get towards Game of the Year. So hopefully I'll be able to check in with you on it privately at least and be like, yo, I had this cool experience. But we'll see. Anything else? Anyone else want to touch anything? There's a game that I played that I need to look up. So because it's briefly Apple Arcade, and I hit the thing with Apple Arcade with iOS apps where it's like I know what the icon looks like and says, but I don't remember what the actual game name is. Which is there not like why is there not just a list somewhere?
It has to exist.
Guildlings?
Somewhere.
Is that the one you're
It's
playing?
not. I mean, I did play a little Guildlings. Do you want to talk about Guildlings while I look up this other one? Did you play? You played some of that too, right?
Yeah, I played like 40 minutes of it. It's a new RPG from one of the co-creators of Three's, Asher Volmer, I believe is their name. And it's set in like a cute world where there's it's a magical fantasy land, but ironic and twee is the wrong way to. It's just it pokes fun at like the inherent goofiness of the concept in a way that is delightful. But what's like more interesting about it is the combat mechanics, in which you're not trying to attack enemies. You're just trying to survive the fight. Like there's already like when the fight opens, there's a predetermined amount of turns, like let's say 3, and that like sort of determines the strength of the enemy. And everything, I mean, the game in general is like philosophically like very concerned with like sort of like mental health and how people feel. And so that actually plays directly into the combat. So enemies can like make you sad or angry, and you can cast spells that like deflect that or like take anger and like turn it into happiness. And so you are trying to balance between those things. And like there are certain enemies where like you're actually trying to set up the turns so that you leave the fight happy. Like there's happy and there's like ecstatic. And if you're ecstatic, then you have certain access to certain powers, and that can like open up, a bridge or whatever that you couldn't get to otherwise. It just seems neat. I've heard it's very short, like 3 hours. It's like the first chapter of like a larger.
Short. Okay.
Yeah,
I put a little bit of time into it,
a larger story that they're.
Do you know if it's coming to any other platform, or is it going to be phones only?
Doubtful. I think it's phones only. I think like the impression I've gotten is a lot of games that were coming to Apple Arcade at launch had like a multi-platform bent, because there was a bit of like, hey, let's sign some games and buff up the launch. But I think those will be the exception rather than the norm going forward. I mean, easily could be the case where it's like, a year later they show up somewhere else. But I think that the general idea is going to be that games show up on Apple Arcade and stick on Apple Arcade. So if you have it, and I blew past that free month and was like, whoops, all right, I guess I'm here for another month.
Yeah,
I beat Grindstone, which is basically
congrats.
I paid $5. Oh, it's so good. I really, really enjoyed Grindstone a lot. And so I basically paid 5 months for an extra month of Apple Arcade to play Grindstone, which was worth it. It was worth the $5 far and away. But Guildlings is enough to keep me around for another month at least.
Cool. I want to recommend a game on Apple Arcade called Takeshi and Hiroshi. It has like such a cool style. It's kind of like a claymation vibe. And the pitch of the game is really adorable. You are a 14-year-old who is like an amateur hobbyist game maker, and you have a 7-year-old brother. And you think you're hot shit because you're a 14-year-old. And the game begins with this like great little claymation-esque. I actually don't know if it is claymation or if it's CG that's like meant to look like claymation. Where you're like, your little brother's like, oh, you're making a cool game, right? And you're like, yeah, And so you basically show him an unfinished game. You show him like, basically a game with like some assets, but no actual like monsters or levels in it or anything. And he's like, oh, I really want to play this. I really want to play this game you're making. And I'd be really sad if I couldn't. And you're like, oh, fuck, I can't send him to bed sad. All right. It's just like the whole thing is like your character, you lost your father, and so you've been kind of like the kind of stepdad of your little brother. You're like taking on that role. So I really want him to go to bed happy. And so you set it up so that you were playing all of the monsters and like level of this JRPG that your little brother is playing. And it's just like the character, you go to the gameplay. The gameplay is like the hero character is running left to right. And what you're basically choosing is what the monsters your little brother has to fight are. And there are kind of a couple of things happening here. One, you need to make these fights easy enough at first so that the character can win and level up and then fight the harder enemies. But also, you need your little brother to stop the game feeling happy about it, which means the fights have to be interesting. And the way the fights get ranked as interesting is if you take damage, if the enemies do damage to your little brother in the fights. And so you need them to be difficult enough that he gets stressed, but then wins the fight and then moves on.
That's very
good.
But
also balances that he levels up because his health gets recharged when he levels up. And you need to do a number of these rounds successfully every like mission of the game. It's really, really cute. And that core conceit of just like, I mean, it's so cute. There's a moment where he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to be over here I'll just be doing homework while you're playing the game. Like he lies to his little brother to not let him know that he's actually building the game with him as he plays. It's very, very, very cute, and it just has like the cutscenes have such a stunning look, and it was just like a really good phone game to be playing on the commute. Also I can play it on my commute because it's not connected to the internet. So I recommend Takeshi and Hiroshi on Apple Arcade. Any other games before we talk about some new stuff that has been bubbling? We should get into it because there's kind of a lot in terms of stuff to hit. We can't talk about Stadia yet, right, Patrick? That's Monday.
No, we'll revisit that on Monday.
Okay. Can I say real quick that the Stadia AMA was one of the funniest things I've seen in recent PR history?
It pained me to read that because it felt like that was just a bunch of people who have probably been working.
You're right.
Ridiculous hours.
That was mean of me.
No. I think like in a broader perspective, it is worth dunking on. Like on like reading these statements. So like basically,
it's rough.
There is a thread. If you go back on my my Twitter, I tweeted it out in which there was an AMA leading up to the launch of Stadia, which launches next Monday, in which people were asking questions. And like the first thing that someone tweeted out was, I guess there's been some shipment problems with. I want to pull it up because I want to actually read what the person said. But there's been shipment issues where people aren't going to get their equipment in time for the launch, and so someone responded with,
It's in the channel.
Yeah, you know what? Here's a crazy idea. Let me personally deliver one. If you're in the Bay Area and you are okay with me coming to your house at 9 a.m. on the 19th, please DM me with your pre-order number. I'll pick one person based on an order received and how close you are to my house and drop by on my way to work. Bring your order and we can even play your first game together.
Don't do that.
That's just... Don't. I mean, that's someone trying to be nice. Right? Like someone...
My very favorite response
to that a genuine place.
Was someone on Twitter who retweeted that and said Death Stranding 2019. I will personally deliver your Stadia. This delivery has to be made.
So the rest of this thread is just a bunch of announcements that Google has not made about features that are not going to be at launch. It has an achievement system, but it won't be in the UI. That UI is coming, quote, shortly after launch, which is, you're going to hear that a bunch of times.
Just added to your Google account. Just appears as part of your email signature. You have no choice.
So the achievements are being like cataloged, but they just don't surface in the UI until later.
Real quick, that joke.
The Chrome,
I'm going to give credit to this joke. This joke was by @RainbowFission, aka Brian 2, the sequel to Brian. Shout outs to Brian 2. All right.
The promise of Stadia is that you'll be able to play anywhere on any device. That is not true at launch. That has been upfront as something that has been true. But the whole idea has been you've been able to use at least like your Chromecast Ultra in order to display it on your TV. I think it's going to eventually work on other Chromecasts, but like Chromecast Ultra, for whatever reason, is what it is at launch. Well, it turns out it'll only work on the Chromecast Ultra that ships with the Founders Edition, which is $150.
Why?
Because it has the newest firmware, and that firmware will not go out for other Chromecast Ultras until soon after launch. So, if you have multiple TVs and the thought was like, I'll be able to go throughout the house and play it wherever I want, that is not true. Family sharing, which I believe they've said, we're upfront saying that's not going to be here at launch. It's just the person who responded saying, soon, we'll have family sharing, but for now you'll just, quote, have to buy games for your child's account, which is just,
what?
Don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say go pay another $60 or whatever they're going to charge. They haven't said the pricing for the games.
Small
yet.
children are definitely just dying this Christmas for their Stadia.
Yeah, that launch lineup.
The It toy of 2019
Oh man, it just that is
Stadia,
the thing. It's not like I don't. Anyway, continue.
Hold your applause. Stadia on iOS, which they've said is not at launch, but just the response of, quote, oh man, I wish I knew. Which is just like, okay. There, and then let's see, there might be, also I should credit this thread to at Russell Holly, 2 S's, 2 L's, another 2 L's. Russell has spoken. There might be one Stadia game with Stream Connect by the end of the year. State Share and Crowd Play aren't coming till next year.
So Stream Connect is what? That's the one where you'd
be able to like hand off like, hey, I'm stuck on this puzzle.
Right.
Like, could you come in and finish that for me?
And then State Share was the one where you could straight up like, hey, I'm watching a video. I want to jump in here in the video or whatever, right? Something like that. It's like,
maybe it's
the other way around. Maybe that's
you're
the other way
in a game, and
but like one of them.
Yeah.
And then the other was like, hey, I'm stuck on this puzzle, and then it will scrub like YouTube videos to like show you like the solution to that puzzle. Boy, how are they going to curate that? Because that's gone well on YouTube so far. Here's this Nazi telling me how to get through this tomb in Rise of the Tomb Raider. Let's see.
That's pretty harsh on Lara Croft. I mean, we have some issues with Lara Croft, but she's not quite a Nazi. No, I got it.
You need a phone in order to buy games. You will not be able to buy them through the TV UI.
That is unbelievable. Wait. And it's like you can't even do it on a web app. There's not even like a website.
No, okay. Maybe I'm.
Read the text.
Maybe I'm breaking my NDA. You can buy the games on the website. Okay. I feel like I will be forgiven for clarifying.
That you
can do that on the web.
It'd be very funny
the rest of this
blacklisted us.
Anyway, you get the gist, which is that I think I proposed that actually what this was an early access launch, and I think stuff like this gives an increasing sense that this is coming in as hot as possible. I mean, there are games that are not part of the launch lineup that they said were part of the launch lineup like not that long ago. So clearly this is like get it out the door, address it later, sort of things. But so
fix it in post.
Stadia, fix it in post.
Fix it in post. Well, I think that we'll talk more about that on Monday. I'm very curious to see what Patrick's thoughts are.
If you have questions, send those in, and we can address those on Monday.
Other news: XO 19 is, or do you have something else, Cado?
No.
Oh, okay. XO 19 happening today, the big Xbox event for the winter. Some new games being announced.
Is that in Brazil again? Wasn't it in Brazil last year?
I don't know.
I feel like that was true.
I don't know.
Anyway.
No, it's in London, isn't it? I think it's in London. What's popping off here? You got a press release, right, Patrick?
I did, yeah. So we're recording this prior to all of this happening, and so
there could be stuff that we don't hit that like is big news.
Yeah, it could be stuff we don't hit. We also I can tell you the new Rare game is called Everwild, but this press release has no details on Everwild. It says at this evening's X09 event in London, we were able to share with fans some of the incredible things that the different teams are Rare have been working on. This included talking about the next monthly update for Sea of Thieves, as well as giving fans a first glimpse at the new IP from Rare, Everwild. But there's no details on what that is. So
what else? Obsidian first-person co-op survival game.
Yeah, a game called Grounded, which actually has a pretty cute premise. In Grounded, players are shrunken to the size of an ant and tasked with surviving in the unique micro-world of a suburban backyard. Players must gather, craft, and build bases with everyday objects found within the yard, searching for life-saving resources and living alongside giant, peaceful insects while fighting to survive massive, hostile inhabitants. Grounded provides a mix of environmental and narrative-driven storytelling set in a versatile, handcrafted sandbox structure, allows players to create their own experience from the ground up. Tasks that may seem approachable when human-sized become a challenge in this dangerous backyard landscape. Yada yada yada. That's who knows how that is, but it's a cute premise for we're gonna make a survival game. And they basically, I don't know where I have it elsewhere, but basically. There was sort of like a quote. They're like trying to like head off. Like, wait, so you bought Obsidian so they could make a survival game, huh? And the quote was basically like, no, like this is an extremely small team that did like
That's
a prototype and it seemed cool, and we're letting them do that. Like the big, RPGs that you would expect from them are,
down the road.
That is still coming. They're one of the big ones is Dontnod is doing a game called Tell Me Why, and it caught my eye because in the like bullet point version, and I'll end up reading from the press release so I can give it full context. Because this is clearly going to be part of like their marketing positioning of this game, is Xbox Game Studios will reveal Tell Me Why, an exclusive narrative adventure from Dontnod, the studio behind Life is Strange, which features the first playable video game hero from a major studio and publisher who is also transgender. So obviously that's, not only like central to the character, but like also is going to be something where they want to like puff their chest and say, haha, look what we did. We're funding a trans character, which, I think there's that rubs a little bit.
Like doing
weirdly,
it. Yes, we should have more stories about trans people, and there should be more trans characters. And I'm happy that they're involving a consultant in some capacity.
It's like,
yeah, so
also,
I do wonder if part of this is like them trying to head off, like, motherfuckers, are you going to get this wrong? So let me just read from the press release.
Okay.
Set in small town Alaska, Tell Me Why places you at the heart of a mystery in an intimate, true-to-life story where twins Tyler and Allison, Allyson, Ronan, use their extraordinary bond to unravel memories of a loving but troubled childhood. Quote, the core mechanic of the game is to the special bond Tyler and Allison share, and is also a theme strongly anchored in the Dontnod storytelling approach. Over the course of the story, players will explore the identical twins' different memories of key events and choose which memory to believe. Ultimately, the choice players make determine the strength of the twins' bond and the future course of their lives. Tyler and Allison are both playable characters and equal heroes in the story. Quote, we love them both and are especially grateful to Microsoft for its full support, openness, and help regarding Tyler's identity and character as a transgender man. Dontnod has worked closely alongside Microsoft and the LGBTQ media advocacy group GLAAD in shaping Tyler as an authentic representation of the trans experience, as well as a genuine multi-dimensional character. Tyler is also the first playable video game hero for a major studio and publisher who is also transgender. You'll notice a theme with that line. Quote, Microsoft and Dontnod have approached Tyler with a real commitment to authenticity, explained Nick Adams, director of transgender representation at GLAAD. Tyler is a fully realized, endearing character whose story is not reduced to simplistic trans tropes. Creating a playable lead trans character and taking such care to get it right raises the bar for future LGBTQ inclusion in gaming. The story of Don't Tell Me Why is comprised of 3 chapters that were released on a clear and predictable schedule. Dontnod are passionate about the opportunities for community building and audience engagement that will come with episodic storytelling. But they also dedicate it to innovation and improvement. We're thrilled to announce the entire Tell Me Why story release in the summer of 2020.
The thing that I was going to say before is that, like, my hope is that there are some trans developers on the project too. I don't know what's up with the development team, and I also don't expect like those developers to having trans developers on your team does not mean that like if the game's representation stumbles that it's their fault or something like that. It is not as simple as that. Nor does it mean
who knows what their creative role is
absolutely.
and influences
but
on.
I hope that
moment to moment.
that it is more than just. Like a consultancy, awesome, 100%, but it's like a big company that has a lot of projects, and I think that the best way to get that stuff done right is to bring trans folks on board directly.
Well, I sort of feel like Patrick just wrote that piece this week, and we talked about it in the last pod about the construction of Parvati, right? And Kate Dollarhide's writing of that character from her own experiences. And I think one of the reasons that character ends up feeling so identifiable, so relatable, so much like a friend you are hanging out with is that it is coming from that perspective. It is not someone approaching this character as, here's the defining aspect of this character and I must communicate all these things at all times correctly. It is somebody drawing from lived experience to portray a fully dimensional character who is also in that case Ace. And that seems a hell of a lot easier to do if you're someone who has that lived experience rather than someone who is trying to do right by marginalized groups, but whose primary avenue is to go to consultants and be like, so, what's this like?
Yeah.
That's tough. That is a tough challenge.
It is, and which doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, or that like you should be like, all right, well, I guess that means I don't have to try. For me, it ends up being a question of resourcing, and like there are trans men who work in the world of video games and who write video games and who are available. There is definitely like someone who could help them write this story. And I know that might be true. That already might be true. Like we don't.
It could be it could be in a video feature that rolls. Like we should be clear. Like we haven't seen the trailer. We haven't seen. This is just like a very blank press release that was given to like.
Yeah, I'm not even. We're not even. This is not like a heavy criticism of this. It's just like all right, please get this right type thing. Because I know it will mean a lot to a lot of folks. So
it does make me like I've seen enough from Dontnod and what they've done to like give them even a benefit of the doubt, but more that I'm willing to entertain the idea more than I would at face value for a lot of other developers, given the way they've handled lots of other touchy subjects that I could easily have gone awry or not felt authentic. And I think they've done that, you know, with race and sexuality in like various forms over the course of like the Life is Strange series, child abuse. Like they haven't shied away from that stuff and have shown a sensitivity. But those games also didn't like come out of the gate with like, what's up? Like, you know what we're about? Being gay. You know what we're about? Like racism. Right. And so this could just, again, like this could be Microsoft, right? In which like they're seeing like, hey, actually like, we could boil this down to like a marketing point and like get some credit. And the reason I bring this up like relative to like Outer Worlds is like part of but you know, in talking to Kate about writing that character and part of, you know, the response she has seen from, you know, queer players and people who identify as ace was that like, oh, like, yeah, she's ace, but like, okay, like that's just, it's something you learn as like on a long checklist of things about that character that like build into the character of who she is, as opposed to like up front, like, you know who Parvati is, like she's ace, right? It's not like she's out of the gate and it's like, let's talk about this and like center it. Now, granted, maybe this will be part like crucial to the story. And so centering it in the marketing is both them planting some sort of flag, but it's also like writing like a huge check. And then also it like makes me a little nervous when it seems like, oh, suddenly appealing to including marginalized groups and centering them in a story can also be something that you feel like you can cash in on. I mean, I guess that's like a better world than not inclusion, but it can feel a little grimy.
Yeah. That's a thing that when we recorded a podcast on Life is Strange 2 at the best part of our end of the year stuff last year, that I was immediately kind of weary of. It was like, are they just gonna start going down the, inclusionary, diversity representation?
Today is trans.
Like this one, we've got Latinx people. Next one's gonna be trans, and then the next one's gonna like as like a checklist that they feel like they have to hit in that way, rather than including those sorts of characters in whatever story they're trying to tell, right? Which is a different kind of. It's a different focus, obviously, like more like the Parvati thing, where it's like it's not the focus of that game, but the inclusion is maybe. I mean, we don't know what this game is going to be like, obviously, but like having enjoyed Life is Strange 2, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it just kind of feels almost like it's like, oh yeah, here's the next one they're going to do, and it kind of feels a little weird that it's just like each one is like. We're focusing on one new marginalized group that we're going to like kind of do this one thing with and then move on.
Yeah, I definitely have mixed feelings. Go ahead, Rob.
I think there's a couple things. Just real quick. One, I feel like we said, I hope they get this right. I think that is probably an impossible, like getting it right is going to mean so many different things to so many different people that to a degree, when representation is this thin on the ground, it feels like a bit of a Kobayashi Maru, because probably there will be ways in which folks feel you have misrepresented experiences they've had, or you're approaching them from a different perspective. And being one of the first studios to really like try and tell a story centering on this does put you on the hook. It is a big check. And my suspicion is it will be an ambivalent. It'll be successful that creates a lot of ambivalence. Like, I think that's what success looks like. I think, best case, this still ends up feeling like something that may leave people feeling a bit ambivalent, because there simply isn't that much representation. Certainly with main characters, certainly as a focus of a narrative. But I don't know. I do, to a degree, I think I try not to be too cynical about something like this, because I just don't see it.
There are previous attempts, like
head on.
Cado's right. Like, it can feel a little checklisty, but like they've sort of not perfect, but like they've done a really good job with previous attempts at things like this. Like, there's a reason that like there
is like, for as many like queer folks who really resonated with Chloe and Max in season 1 of Life is Strange, there are quite a few queer women critics for whom the ending of that story felt like a betrayal of those characters.
It's a trope, yeah.
Yeah, so like I don't want to be forced.
But isn't that end state? That end state is sort of like what I guess Rob's speaking to, right? Like it's likely.
Who knows? Yeah, totally. But I mean, the real answer here is there will be as many perspectives on this as the perspectives will be as diverse as people are, right? Like we live in a moment where I think the four of us move in circles online. I've said this before, that are very reactive and that are also very like hypercritical, very much, I don't want to say like ironic, but there's a degree to which it is very hard to do right by us. It is very hard. Presence isn't enough alone. Do you know what I mean? Like we expect more, and then our friends expect more. The critics that I trust expect more than that. And so I expect a year from now to see on my feed next to each other trans critics who I respect and love explaining why this has failed them, next to fans who are so eager and feel so unrepresented in culture writ large, and who also just aren't critics, being very enthusiastic about the sheer presence. I mean, this is the Outer Worlds thing around critique of capitalism. This is like so many examples of like, hey, this thing does a little bit of X. And for an audience that has only engaged with works from mainstream creators, from the AAA game space, from Hollywood cinema, from like big budget bookstore bestseller lists, like that style of representation ends up hitting an audience that doesn't even know that there is outsider art, that there is art coming from independent spaces that might be doing this better, that there could be creators like them that they could be giving their money and support to. And I think one of the difficult things to do, it's nowhere near as difficult as being trans, but as someone who wants to be an ally to the trans folks in my life, like, it's like, how do I both the answer is I lift the voices of trans folks and what their experiences are and stay the fuck in my lane is the actual answer. It is not that difficult. I take it back, but it's a practice that I have to do, which is like, when this game comes out, the people who I'm going to be interested to hear about around these issues are the folks for whom this game either speaks to them or speaks about them. And it will do both, whether it wants to or not, because that is what being marginalized and creating works about marginalized folks ends up doing. And so, like, yeah, this is absolutely a we will have to see thing. We could also all see this trailer in 2 hours and be like, yikes, or like, oh, hey, this is actually, like you said, there'll be a little like micro doc that comes with it that is like, here's a personal story told by someone who has a deep and intimate connection to this identity. We'll see, right? But I definitely expect it to be divisive, not in the sense that like, not just in the obvious sense, which is like they're going to get a lot of hate from complete shitbags for even saying this, which to your point, Rob, I get why you're like, side on the sense of like, hey, tackle it head on, because to not do it is to give in to a bunch of assholes who would prefer things to not even come up. But at the same time, like I definitely suspect that divisiveness to be what happens with any mainstream, anytime a mainstream developer tries to tackle something like this, it is going to be messy. We'll see. It shouldn't be. I think that is the thing that's so frustrating, is that the inclusion of a trans person, the inclusion of a trans man in this game is just like, yeah, okay, there are trans men in the world. Like they are all around us. You know what I mean? Like there are lots of very dear people to me who are trans men. That is a reality of my life. That does not necessarily mean that like it shouldn't be a back of box feature. I think maybe that is the bit that rubs the wrong way, is that hearing about inclusion in the same like the same like enthusiasm that someone on a stage talks about a puzzle mechanic can feel like it's reductive of what that inclusion might actually mean. And that can be really hard. But also we live in a world in which the way in a friend of mine literally just sent me a piece of a quote from a piece of immigration paperwork that was like, thank you for being a valued U.S. Consular Electronic Application Center customer. And it's like, oh, cool. Like anyone who's applying for citizenship is a customer of the United States. We live in a world in which the rhetoric of all things is reduced to back of box like feature set shit. Like everyone speaks in that mode already. And so I get why you end up releasing a press release that talks about like their unique connection, the way you would talk about the back of that would show up on the Brothers, back of box thing or another or the A Way Out, right? You would next to, and also he's a trans man. And that like, it's frustrating that is the world that we live in, but I'm also not surprised to see it in some ways, Anyway, I'm so curious to see what their actual pitch is of this at XO19. Is there anything?
The fact that it's included in two different separate bullet points suggests that will be in some way part of the trailer. Let's see. Anything else? Let me scroll through this summary press release.
It's interesting that it doesn't sound like Scarlet stuff here. Scarlet the next
They
Xbox,
explicitly
right?
said that this was not. I think this is meant to be like, hey, this is our closing act with Xbox One, Xbox One X. Here is some peeks at the future. But I think they're keeping a lot of cards close to their chest until
that peak feels like, hey, we bought all those developers. They are making games. We have them making games. There are going to be exclusives. There are going to be things that make you excited about playing stuff on Xbox right away. We're going to have Xbox games coming out tomorrow, or whatever, right? We're going to have Xbox games for the next few months. And you can trust that we're reinvesting in first party development, in that way.
Yeah, so let's see. Grounded, Project X Cloud, which is their Stadia, their cloud thing, is coming to Windows 10 PCs in 2020. We're also expanding support for more Bluetooth controllers, including the DualShock 4. That's cool, I guess. They're adding game streaming from the cloud to Xbox Game Pass, so I guess that just comes with it. Maybe that's already been the case. I wasn't not sure on that. New Sea of Thieves update, blah, blah, blah. Big holiday, Black Friday deal, yada, yada, yada. On today's Inside Xbox, we unveiled over 50 games coming to Xbox Game Pass. Link to post is what this says.
Great.
Which that post doesn't exist. This is kind of cool. If you haven't had Game Pass Ultimate, you've been able to get it for $1 for 2 months. Now they're going to expand that to $1 for 3 months, starting today, I guess, or yesterday when this podcast comes out. Bleeding Edge, that game we played at E3.
That like
Austin,
arena-based team like PvP.
The Ninja Theory game.
Yeah.
Like, there seems to be like there's a through line with like a lot of what's happening with like the acquisitions, which is like they want to show that they've bought these studios but are like clearly waiting for like the big projects to be part of a big Scarlet unveil. So it's like, yo, show Bleeding Edge, like, which could be fine. I think we had like fun with it, but I don't know that I've ever thought about Bleeding Edge until this very moment when I'm reading this press release. But hey, that's what Game Pass is for, right? It's people will try that game and that they would not pay 30. No one will pay $30 for Bleeding Edge, or very few people, but whatever it costs. That's coming out March 24th. Tell Me Why. I will say just like one small thing on Tell Me Why, unrelated to our discussion, is that I thought it interesting that they included a whole passage about like, we understand that people like to play these games and you need to build a community, which seems to be like just a complete reaction to like how Life is Strange 2, despite being excellent, has more or less like bombed or not caught on because it's been like 4-5 months in between episodes. Right. It's just really difficult, especially when you don't have the lightning in a bottle of Chloe and Max to like string people along. Like, so the fact that they're saying up front, like basically June, July, August, you'll get 3 episodes and you're good is I think a really smart, because they could probably launch an episode of that like pretty soon, but the fact that they're going to wait and just string them all together is smart. Halo Reach coming to the Halo Master Chief Collection on December 3rd. I presume that must be for PC. New footage of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Oh, a Rob special. The future of strategy is revealed in the first gameplay trailer for Age of Empires 4. Today, the newly named studio World's Edge revealed the first gameplay trailer for the highly anticipated Age of Empires 4. Yada, yada, yada. Shannon also included a brand new launch trailer for Age of Empires 2.
Patrick, that email you got have linked to like an unlisted video, perchance?
It does not. Sorry. Are you excited? Is that legitimate? I saw strategy, but can you like situate a context for like where this falls?
Oh, sure. I don't know where it falls, man. I'm super curious because like Age of Empires is a series that at its zenith was the most traditional base building style economic RTS that you could get. Like Age of Empires 2, which they just released the definitive edition of. I need to get to it. I've got code for it. But Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings, was the one that blew the hell up. Bruno Diaz wrote a great piece for us about how that community kept that game going for years. It's still not a solved game years and years later. But when you think of what are RTSs in the most if you're looking for the archetypal base building RTS, it's Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 3 tried to reinvent itself and not be that and do something different. And it ended up kind of being rejected. And so that the RTS in general is a genre that is not even at a crossroads. It's more like stalled in an intersection in the Southwest is the way I'd put it. And then Relic was attached to Age of Empires 4, that they were sort of loaned out by Sega to Microsoft to make a new Age of Empires. Where that gets really interesting is Relic tried to reinvent the RTS and remarry it with the MOBA genre with Dawn of War 3, their last 40K RTS, and that was also roundly rejected. People did not click with it at all, and it basically ended the Dawn of War series. So I'm really curious, with Age of Empires 4, what is it? What do you make? Because on the one hand, Age of Empires 2 is a really old-fashioned type of game, and maybe its moment has passed, but everyone who has been that's played out, we need to do something different with the RTS, has basically watched those ambitions implode.
Is it time for the next big RTS? When was the last big RTS?
It's always time for the big RTS.
Right.
Grey Goo was huge in my household.
Literally the only one I can think of that actually popped was the first part of StarCraft 2.
That was a while ago.
That was just a while ago. That's what I'm saying.
Is Company of Heroes.
Company of Heroes was when? I know KOTOR was after, but
KOTOR did well. But Company of Heroes is not a new franchise. Sure,
no, it's 2006 is Company.
Everyone
of Heroes.
should play Ardan's Assault though. That thing kicks ass.
When was the last one? When was the last one? I'm getting a list. I'm getting a list by year. Here we go. 20. Let's go through. I'm not going to count things that are not RTSs. Like the Anno series has RTS elements, but that's not an RTS.
That's a city builder.
That ain't it. Warcraft 3 Reforged. Did that come out this year? Or is that not out yet?
That's
the remake
still
of
coming
Warcraft
out.
3. Okay.
in beta
I
or
bet
whatever.
that doesn't pop off because Warcraft 3 didn't pop off like that in the competitive scene so much as its mods did.
Yeah.
Right?
Dota.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't do all right. I played a lot of it at the time. They are billions?
Sort
That did all right, didn't it?
When
did
Age
well.
of Empires was
Yeah.
a tower defense game. That's kind of what it was.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what it
And
was.
people liked it. People liked it.
Halo
then
Wars
they made it
2.
into a full game with campaign. It sucked. Anyway.
Halo Wars 2? No? Warhammer
You know, it's on my
40,000
I'm going to get to that any day now.
Dawn of War 3 did not really do well. I know people liked Tooth and Tail, but I don't know anyone who plays it competitively.
Played it.
I know a couple people who
I
played
didn't.
it.
Played
but
it.
I admired what it was trying to do, but I did not dig it.
Ashes
much.
of the
Also, it was-
Singularity.
Fuck that game.
Whomst?
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
Some of this is just a lie. Again, you can't put Hearts of Iron 4 on this list. That's not what we mean when we say RTS. It is real time. What do you think about like Off-World Trading Company? Is that an RTS?
That's
Not
a
what we
good
mean,
question.
but did have a scene.
Yeah, you know what? It is. It deserves consideration, but also it's very much one of those conscious like. But what if I weren't an RTS?
Yeah.
Like it's very much like what if a Euro board game,
Right.
but an RTS, and it's cool.
I thought you meant conscious, like Common the rapper, and like yeah, it is kind of that too, though. It's like Common doing a TED talk, but an RTS. Homeworld Deserts of Karak.
Hell yeah, great
See,
game. Not sure that
2016.
many people played it.
Not okay. It didn't blow up, but like, this is the thing. Right? The genres don't go away; they just get quiet.
Right.
Like you said, Grey Goo 2015 definitely didn't really blow up. A bunch of Age of Empires 2 expansions that I'm skipping over here. Planetary Annihilation I thought maybe would have been the thing because I had that big Kickstarter,
Yeah.
but no, not really. StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void in 2015, also not really. I'm not counting Total War games here. Or those
No.
have been coming out, but that's not the basis of what those are. And then yeah,
Those
Ardennes
aren't
Assault
RTSs,
is
really,
Ardennes Assault was 2014. Company of
What a
Heroes
great
2,
game.
Ardennes Assault, very long time ago. Still, I wouldn't say took off like that.
Fresh as it was yesterday.
Pikmin 3.
Oh.
Pikmin 3. Company of Heroes 2 was 2013. That's 6 years ago, Rob. And also,
I can't believe there hasn't been a Pikmin for you. I
know.
How is that? That seems like,
know.
come on, Switch.
Well, it was explained that like when Miyamoto appeared on stage, at Fallon, I want to say he had to leave the Pikmin behind. Caravel explained all this on a giant bomb.
okay. Command & Conquer 4, Tiberian Twilight in 2010. Ruse. Do you remember Ruse?
Oh, yeah.
Ruse in 2010.
Hell yeah!
I feel like
Great game.
Oh, that was the Ubisoft game, right? Where you
Yeah.
could talk into the microphone.
I'm going to say 2010 was like the last big push. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, because that was Dawn of War 2, that was Ruse, that was Wings of Liberty, that was the first StarCraft. Was that the
Right.
first StarCraft?
Yes, Wings of Liberty was the first
yeah.
one of
To
those.
20, some of the Sins of the Solar Empire stuff was coming out then. 2010 seems like it was like the year that there was like,
You call it a last push. I call it a last gasp.
God, brutal. I think you have to go.
Which is probably why Age of Empires 4 is just probably like I think that it's maybe telling that they're announcing it on the day that Age of Empires 2 comes out, which is probably that it ends up being pretty traditional, right? Like we're in an era where like Command & Conquer is getting remastered.
90s nostalgia,
World of
baby.
Warcraft is getting remastered. So it's like what if Age of Empires 4 are like what if Age of Empires 2 but like yo, we built it from the ground up for 2019, So
Where it gets really tricky, I think, is Age of Empires 2. I think people really liked that game because most of them were playing it solo. And I think what changes in 2010 is so many of these games are misled into thinking what people really want to do is just play multiplayer. And they're like, hey, why don't you, take it online? Like StarCraft Wings of Liberty was very much like,
Yeah.
don't even do custom matches. You know what you should do is play ladder. Get on that ladder. Play matchmaking.
But that is kind of what that group of people wanted, or like that community. Kind
yeah,
of
and there's like
wanted.
5 of them.
Now, I feel like when that came out, though, it did kind of have its moment for that like year or two.
Because it was StarCraft, though.
Right.
I think yes, I think it had its moment, but people were like, "Hell yeah, StarCraft!" But what people interpreted was esports.
Right. Well, and that's the problem. In a real way, is like what I would want from an age 4 is not esports, and I hope that they can resist the urge to esports. And that's just a personal preference.
Resist the urge to esports. I wish you would esports.
Cado, sometimes you're looking for pod titles.
Right there.
There you go.
Got it.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll see.
So
good
we'll see.
question.
Is it just?
As well.
Are we? What are we? Is there? God, is the RTS? Sometimes genres leave us for a long time.
Homeworld 3 is like happening.
No, again, those games come out and they're good, but I mean in terms of big popular, like having kind of like real estate of the mind, it's just not. It's just it hasn't. It's hard for me to imagine what does that again. But that's why they don't pay me the big bucks. You know, I'm not an Imagineer. So, if I were, maybe I could put it together.
I didn't know Disney was in the
they're in the
RTS.
RTS. Oh,
Yeah.
Disney is in the RTS business for sure. What do you think those Marvel movies are about? That's creep.
Minecraft Dungeons,
Okay.
closer look. Minecraft Earth celebrates early access, yada yada.
Yeah, that's the iOS
Wasteland
Android game.
AR.
Yeah, the AR thing.
yeah.
Wasteland 3,
Okay,
May
That's-
2020.
I should. Yeah, that's
Get blown away by the first glimpse of Crossfire X gameplay.
Blah! That's
I don't know
the
what
Crossfire
Crossfire
X is
X
is Space COD, Space COD. Damn, it's like shooting people in space.
Oh.
I'm pretty
I was
sure
gonna
that's what
say
that game
finally
is.
the
Oh, cool.
video game of Crossfire that we've all been waiting for.
Crossfire. Oh wait, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I was thinking of a different. Crossfire X is not the one in space. Crossfire X, I think, is just the one that looks like any other. I don't know what this is. What is this?
Is this the one where
This is, like, very
Phil Spencer
big-
came out and made a big
Yes.
deal about a game, and then everyone was like, "What is what is
exactly
this?"
it. Yes.
But I think if I'm correct, the interesting hook here is that Remedy is doing like the story, right? Isn't that also part
All right,
of this?
well, I don't know what the fuck it is.
Crossfire X Remedy story. Yeah, Remedy,
Crossfire X
creator of Max
game?
Payne and Alan Wake, is lending his talents to Crossfire X. Yada yada. Okay, sure.
I hope they're just doing like short films.
That'd be
Like
very
it's
funny.
just like the puppet theater that's in control,
Good.
and like that's it. Like,
Great.
Fucking
damn, we need
Yeah, me
we need weird like hallucinatory puppet sequences in this game. Get me
in
Remedy.
Crossfire's canon, the two factions are Global Risk, a private military corporation that functions as the game's good guys, and Blacklist, a terrorist organization. That's, quote... All right, I'm going to read this whole sentence from the jump. In Crossfire's canon, this is from Polygon. In Crossfire's canon, the two factions are Global Risk, a private military corporation that functions as the game's good guys, and Blacklist, a terrorist organization, quote, that's willing to terrorize anything in sight. They're in it for the money.
It's terrorism, baby.
They're gonna terrorize all this shit. They're gonna terrorize.
Love to terror.
Crossfire, Blacklist. I want to find the original.
Crossfire.
I want to find. I want to see the actual full quote. Here we go. I just need to. I need to know more about the lore of this. I hope it's. I hope it's. I'm not good. Like I know it's probably not for me. No, that's really Blacklist is a terrorist organization that's willing to terrorize anything in sight. The only thing that matters to them is money. If the money's right, then
And
nothing
terror.
is. If the money's
And
right,
terror.
then nothing is impossible for them.
I love this. That sounds great. That's just so pure.
Yeah.
It's like this Dr. Evil or
Yeah,
like-
Global Risk
like-
is an international private military organization that strives to fight for their own justice by helping the weak and refusing jobs that go against their beliefs. They're like a PMC with a heart, Rob, you know?
just so wildly underfunded.
Yeah.
Basically. Like, we don't take jobs that go against our conscience. And it's like they're just sitting there wait. You know, you play their campaign. It's you sitting in like an office waiting for a call.
Just waiting for any call.
Yeah.
God. That'll be fun to see. People apparently think it's.
I just want to terrorize anything in sight.
I just can't wait.
God damn it!
Terrorizing this desk right now.
I see a supermarket. I'm like, I'm going to terrorize that.
Good. I'm glad we both went to anything else come out of Exo 19, Patrick?
No, the last thing that's mentioned here is a new look at the game, The Artful Escape, which is an indie game that was shown a couple of years back and kind of disappeared. So,
remember that having a cool look, maybe?
Yeah, it did have a cool look.
Artful.
Yeah. Oh, I remember this. I played this at this had previously, is this still being published by Annapurna?
Annapurna.
Okay. Yeah. I played this at PAX a few years ago. Very cool look. Last bit of news. Can we talk about Pokemon? Can we talk about
canceled.
It's been canceled.
It's not coming out. It's weird. The game's not coming out anymore.
Because people said if you don't want it, fine.
They ran out of polygons.
There were
triangles.
Yeah.
Specifically.
It just faded away like that dude down on the road from the pop-in. What the fuck? Cado, you wrote an article for the site today. What is happening?
People are mad.
Oh, word?
Yeah, it's the internet. But
I heard that.
When you have a series that has been as long-lived and people have created such strong bonds with, people get extra mad. So this whole current situation, like if you missed it today or yesterday rather, 2 days ago, sorry, time because this comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
The hashtag Game Freak lied was trending. And
Austin, did you start
they
that
lied to you.
No, this one was not me. I was not part of it. Well, I don't know. Did I? Who could say at this point?
No, this has been brewing.
This has been brewing. I would never be involved in anything that uses the hashtag Dexit. The fuck out of here. Jesus. Fucking.
Yeah, that whole that's the thing. So that's where this kind of all started. Was back in during
themselves.
E3, during the Treehouse Live, they mentioned that not traditionally when you finish a Pokemon game, you open up what's called the National Dex, has the Pokedex entries for every single Pokemon that has ever existed in the series, and you would be able through some sort of transfer system, whether that be directly from game to game or through like an internet service, transfer over Pokemon from previous generations.
Yeah.
So people have been holding on to Pokemon for 16 some odd years at this point. And when it was announced that there would not be a national dex in the Galar region, like people were angry because they have a very strong connection to their Pokemon that they've had for a long time now. What's interesting though is that that became kind of a like weird fuel for them to then like scrutinize this game to a level of like nitpicking that it feels like it's beyond anything I've ever seen with Pokemon specifically, given that these games have always been it's a game that is stylized. Its stylization is more cartoony and not like realistic, and a lot of the nitpicking that has come out has been like, look at these graphics, they look so bad. Why does it look like, here's Breath of the, first of all, here's the thing. Here's Breath of the Wild, a game totally like Pokemon.
I'm sending you right now.
Here's the wild area in Pokemon. Why these trees and grass look so bad? I'm off this zoomed in screen cap off a stream or whatever.
These motherfuckers are like, look at the Jaggies on this shadow.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Does this
fucking
sound like
I'm gonna fucking slap your books out your hand.
Wow!
I'm like, it is so embarrassing. It is like, whew.
And
I don't understand liking something so much that you've decided to be the worst version of yourself over it.
right.
I don't get it. And I know this is like, I know that I am like reverting. I know I'm pushing the critic down in me and bringing angry, like I'm using my Joe Budden voice right now. You know what I mean? None of this activity is what will lead to these people like being in a better place in their lives. Like I don't understand what the strategy here is. I like don't get it.
Yeah,
and I also just don't. But I'm also not in it like this, so like I get that I don't have that same nostalgia. I guess I get it.
And well, like,
I don't.
It's not even because there's plenty of people like I have that nostalgia. I'm never gonna like.
Right.
I don't care about any of the shit.
Well, that is
people
the thing,
are bringing
right?
up.
So that is the thing.
Right?
This is why I'm like, is it nostalgia? Because you have that nostalgia.
Yeah.
My friends who love Pokemon, who are excited, have that nostalgia. What they don't have is a completely fucking skewered and broken relationship to consumerism.
I do absolutely think that it is nostalgia stacked on top of that other issue of like we see Puddlegate gamer like overanalyzation of like things where like this product seems to be taking a shortcut that means I'm getting a worse deal out of it. Well, and like it's tied up into the fact that this
remember the Dark Souls 2 Shadow
conspiracy stuff, all that shit. Yeah.
And then it's also tied into the fact that this series is normally on portable consoles, and it's always been like $40 is what they go for.
Right.
It's
so
making the jump to Switch. It's $60 this time, and people like glom onto that as a reason to think that it's going to be like optimized. Like I don't know, games are so big to make.
Yeah, well,
like,
this is the actual thing for me too. A big part of this is that there is a great deal of opacity between what people understand about video games and what actually happens in the creation of video games. And when you get these little like it is the allegory of the cave 100%, where like you see the shadows on the wall in the allegory of the cave in the world of video games are someone said the word game engine, or someone said the word anti-aliasing or frame rate. And I understand how to make fucking video games now. You know what? If they just use
it's in Unity?
Oh, it's in
Unity?
Unity?
Then I know exactly what happens.
If they put it in Unity, idiots, that I know everything about this now. They should use more threads. You know, like that's the sort of shit that happens, and you get like these like overnight experts who, and again, I have no problem criticizing Nintendo, a giant company, but what I do have is like when it comes from this place that has very little understanding of what on the ground like experience of creating a game is, and then more importantly, does not feel like it's engaging with the actual experience of play. It's not engaging with like, hey, I don't like this thing because of the way playing it has made me feel.
Right.
It is entirely hypothetical, and it's entirely based on a desire that at this point was signaled. Like they said months ago, this is not like oh, by the way, there is no national decks. Like that happened months before, so just don't buy it.
Nationalize the decks.
They should. Anyway, Rob, you had a note here.
Well, how much of this though is also... So, Cado, you pulled some quotes where producers on the game were sort of preparing the ground for this. And you framed it to me when we were talking yesterday. You were like, look, these fucking legacy Pokemon were a big fucking problem for game balance. Like it was, you could make whatever Pokemon game you wanted, but in the end, these same fuckers had to be there, and they had to be like the best. They had like they had to be the most useful.
It was that
Pokemon
they were
for all
already
those
the
years.
best, and after you have like over 800 of these, balance becomes an issue of like.
Right.
Like I can't even wrap my mind around like not even knowing how to make games at all. Like understanding that process, how that process is supremely complicated. The idea of balancing that many different Pokemon and all the moves that they can learn and the different combinations they're in, because also a lot of competitive play is doubles instead of singles. And one of the earliest quotes that came out about this was like, we cut the decks. Partially, it was hard for us to try to fit everything in, but then we also looked at game balance and we're like, okay, it's worth it for game balance.
So they even said that they were they're outright saying this is also a balance decision.
There was another interview where that was given to Famitsu, and this is the problem: is that this was translated many times in different ways. one of the ways that it was translated is the one that this specific hashtag glommed onto, which was that they were making higher quality models, which is not strictly what that phrase actually meant, but can be kind of construed that way depending on which translator you ask. And so like it's this like thing where they've given an answer in English that has been translated by an interpreter in an interview.
Yeah.
That was like, it's about balance, and like, sure, it's also hard to get these make these new models, but the ultimate decision came down to the fact that 1,000+ Pokemon like forms, because those also the big forms of every Pokemon that have different mechanical effects, and then so like you double like it's a whole thing.
But the thing that just like jumped out at me in that quote to US Gamer though is what's so funny, like, because I think we've all done this at some point. There are options presented to you. People are like trying to figure out what their ask is going to be. What is the way you're going to approach this? And there's a thing you don't want to do. There's a thing you're like, that is a bad fucking idea. I do not want to open that can of worms. It sucks. And what you want to say is, that idea fucking sucks. I hate it. I'm not doing it. Fuck you. But instead, you're like, oh, so tough to implement. Like, you could do it, but let me tell you what that would involve, right? Like, it's like a building contractor trying to like bring you back down to earth and be like, oh yeah, that's an interesting thought you have for that edition.
A triple deck. You want a deck that is a second house. Yeah, I mean,
Patrick, you want it to be a quadruple decker now, huh? Quad level.
A quad level, yeah.
You could do it. You could do it.
You couldn't.
But to do that, we'd have to collapse your entire house into a singularity and then like build a foundation on that.
But then
so
Patrick goes to
insurance cover that?
Patrick's Jessica goes to physics class in 10 years and comes back and is like, hey Dad, I learned what a singularity was, and explains it to Patrick, and Patrick's like, that motherfucker said my house would fall into a singularity. That wouldn't happen. You know what? I'm leaving Chicago. Checks it. # checks it. And like, that's how these people
get some breakfast cereal.
But that's the thing. Like, there is such a disconnect. In other words, you're right, Rob. Like, that might be what has happened here, right? Where like, you're a producer on this game, you're in PR, you don't want to come out and say, no, it was impossible. Of course it's not impossible, but the scope would have been too much for them based on what their resources were. This was not like a fun thing where they were like, you know what, we're just going to kick back, actually. We're going to be lazy about it and just ship what we can ship. There are like all these different reasons that go into it that have to do with balance, have to do with budget, that have to do with a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And the response to then realizing that you didn't get a fully transparent PR statement, which you never get from anything.
Here's the thing. It's even that It's based off of claims that we still are nebulous and I
catch me being a little skeptical of the 4chan leaks.
Well, no, that's the thing. Even in the 4chan links, they say that the triangle counts are different on these models. Well, that's a different model. Even if it looks visually the same, it's because they're designing the same Pokemon. Fucking no shit, they look the same.
Yeah, of course. Yes,
but it's like you.
The triangle counts are different.
Or like there was somebody fucking
who is
side
Pepe
by
Silva.
side
Triangle on the grassy knoll.
Somebody. Do you know what that was referencing? Because I just got that like this year.
What?
Pepe Sylvia.
No, I don't. I mean, I know the episode it's from. I've seen that episode.
Oh, no, I mean, like, it's Pennsylvania.
What is?
What?
Pepe Sylvia. He's misreading Pennsylvania.
What?
He's misreading Pennsylvania.
He isn't.
That's why it's every piece of mail. Because no one's getting their mail. He says that and is like, but I need to find out. Yes, that is what it is.
No, it's not.
Yeah, go back. If you watch that scene.
Pepe Silva. Yeah, he is. He's doing that.
It's Pepe Sylvia. And it's the mail for the entire company.
How is he misreading Pennsylvania as Pepe Sylvia?
The idea is that he's got like dyslexia, he can't read and stuff.
Okay.
You know, it's like a whole thing. But which is not great.
No.
But that's the joke there that I only had just gotten like this like 2 months ago. Anyways. I forgot what it was.
Isn't Pokemon?
They're designing the same
Isn't it also
Pokemon.
like
Yeah. Oh yeah. And like things like there's the new camp.
I also just said
mechanics.
Pokemon, which is very funny. I just said it like that naturally.
Fuck them. Who cares? Lara Croft. Let's just throw it all out the window.
There's the new camp
Pokemans.
mechanic where you can hang out with all your camp buddies, and
Hell yeah.
people are like, look at these animations. They're exactly the same from the first time you could hang out with your Pokemon. It's like because things have personalities that are the same. And it's not even the thing where like you can like overlap them and they're the same, right? It's the like this looks the same because this Pokemon acts a certain way.
The thing that fucks me up about it is just don't buy it.
Yeah,
games for
ultimately,
kids.
right?
Grow up.
See, I'm not even going that far.
Stop
I
being
get
a
it.
child.
I'm here for the nostalgia
Look.
shit. Motherfucker, you and me were like an hour ago talking about lightsaber colors and shit. It's all you know.
No. But I'm saying I think like this is something like Gita Jackson, who's also a big Pokemon fan, is like in talking through her own responses to this game specifically is like remember like these are games fundamentally for children.
Right.
They appeal to a wide audience, and it tries on some level to like, but like if it's going to choose anything. It's going to choose the direction of the audience that and like I do think there is like a fundamental tension that like informs us to some degree where like Pokemon has been with people most of their lives, but it hasn't grown up with them.
Right.
Like Pokemon has always just been what it is, and it's changed a little bit, but like you know relative to other franchises that like grow up with an audience, like it's always been a certain thing and stayed within certain. So it's like there's I do think sometimes it's like, oh, this is the first Pokemon for console. Finally, Pokemon
totally
for
right.
adults.
Yes.
Finally, grown up Pokemon is here. And no, it's not. It's a children's game,
Right.
and you can still love it. I love Marvel movies. They're for children. Like, there's nothing wrong with enjoying things that are like targeted to like younger audiences, enjoying them as an adult and appreciating them. But they are at their core games for children.
Or for adults who have maintained a state of prelapsarian innocence via the magic of Pokemon.
No, I think the second that you're making Brexit jokes, you
Yeah.
lose the card. Actually, you know what? I take it back.
That's it?
Because I take it back because being able to be like, you know what we should compare this to is the like deeply terrifying situation in the UK right now that's putting that will absolutely put a lot of people in harm's way if Brexit goes through in the ways that it seems like it might, to us not getting to have Pokemon number 207 in my Pokedex and the new one until they patch it in or they release another game in a year.
Here's the other thing is that they've specifically said like we're probably not going to do that because the point is balance.
Because it's the balance. It's balance. It's
Balance of the Force.
Chinese myth dragon is too strong.
Yeah.
that's you know what? They just should have done it sooner. They should have fucking cut this shit out in 2000. They would have already gone through it. It's like
Kill those Pokemon.
Kill the Pokemon. They should have come up with a narrative reason. The new Team Rocket, whatever the evil team is, they're just capping Pokemon. They're just rounding them up and killing them.
No, this team looks pretty goofy actually.
What's their deal?
They're like soccer hooligans.
They're killing the Pokemon.
But why did they just like reboot the narrative? Just like, hey, we're just starting over. Like we're legacy.
People would have hated
Bye-bye.
it. It's the same shit. People would have still been pissed.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay,
Here's the thing is that
there's an element here. I get the thing around the national decks around like there is a for money thing where you could pay to get your Pokemon in the national decks or whatever, right?
Well, you can hold them on a
Or
internet
like the
server.
internet server.
That's supposed to come online in 2020. We don't know what that actually looks like yet. Supposedly, probably subscription because the last one was like Pokemon Bank existed before, which is a similar
that was
thing.
a subscription service.
That was a subscription service that you can move. I forget exactly. I think it was X and Y stuff up to the cloud and then bring it down into Sun and Moon. But so like the assumption is that Home will also be subscription, and the idea is that you can put all your Pokemon in there, and they can just live in this happy box in the sky until you need them again. Because they have also said that the next whatever comes next will probably have a different set of Pokemon.
Cool, good.
So, like,
this should be the new thing.
Like rotate them or
Yeah,
whatever.
you can.
I'm thinking of it even in the way of like magic
I was
cards.
saying, all
You have
card games
sets,
do this,
and like you rotate things out to keep the meta fresh for competitive reasons.
Totally.
And the people who are playing it just for the to get through a story are probably never going to care that much.
Yeah, I mean the thing that Magic ends up having is like whatever your open version
vintage,
of whatever,
which is like every
vintage.
single
Everything
card,
counts.
yeah.
And like the truth is, most people aren't going to play that. No. Most people are going to play whatever is legal, and they want to be at the top of whatever like that very tightly.
Whatever people are playing in the doing what,
So the point is that this shit is just deeply frustrating for me.
It is.
It's embarrassing by association.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of there's a lot of like repetition of like the same things as like shit, like here it is, and like you see that because people were already upset, and like it's easy to kind of just like hit that retweet or like whatever, and like
you're right.
It feels like a lot of the like small points of like where this stuff originates from is kind of the usual like way too angry about puddles,
right?
Situation.
Well, like, and I do want to I think there are different type. The thing that's frustrating also about this is that it ends up like corralling a bunch of different types of criticism into one thing. If you wouldn't be mad that like the attack animations are boring, that's a completely valid critique of a video of a new Pokemon game. Like, damn, they had an opportunity here to do da 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 da. Okay, cool. Make that
a game
criticism.
where you spend most of it in combat.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely
like, that's
a valid
fair.
thing.
Except that.
Go ahead.
Fucking the most popular thing is to turn off battle animation so the battles go faster.
You're right.
Just fucking like blow through it for like the people who are like the hardcore that are trying to get to the end of the game just to make competitive Pokemon so they can get into online stuff.
Right. But you know what I'm saying?
For sure.
There are types of criticisms that don't need to build into
and like
this big thing.
That specific argument is there's this one clip, and I keep seeing that one
kick.
The double click clip, which some people have claimed is also with battle animations turned off. I don't know.
Who knows?
The game is not technically out, and nobody's commented on that yet. As far as I know, I haven't looked the reviews yet because I'm still waiting to actually get my hands on that game. But it's like a mess where people are just like ready and willing to repeat things that are like very speciously like sourced because there's already such a like deep want for these Pokemon to have existed. And like they're now, and then they're like, oh, the reasons that they said were, but it's not even the reasons that they said.
It's not.
It's not. The reasons they said were balance. We don't know what that's like yet.
Right. This is also part of why people don't do interviews about their games. Right. This is why, like, this response is and further, right? Like, we also saw, where was it the Call of Duty community manager this week, Patrick?
Right.
One of the community managers of Call of Duty was expressing, anger and frustration at, the way the community has treated her, and obviously, being a woman, those attacks become incredibly personal, much faster than it does for anybody else.
That is what I was trying to emphasize. Like, this is not even personal in the way that some folks, especially women in this industry, have to face that shit.
Well, there's no way they're not on Twitter.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
All you can do is start a hashtag and I don't know, hope that Nintendo notices and whatever the mind is that believes this will.
The Pokemon company's on Twitter.
Yeah, but
not the developers.
This is specifically Ashton Williams, who's a
actually,
senior
one of them
communications
is right.
manager.
Some of them are actually. I take that back. So I saw one of the shitty blowups over this was
targeted.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was like Pokemon producer or someone like tweets at some artist, and then people spun that into its own. We got stuff doing this. I want to eat lunch. I don't want to fucking talk about these shitty Pokemon fans anymore. This Microsoft event starts in half an hour.
Yeah, I think we can be done.
We can be done. When's that game actually out?
Friday. Today,
Yeah.
Hopefully we get code.
Yeah,
Maybe they didn't send us a code
today
because they knew we would count the triangles. They knew we would do our due diligence and count the triangles.
No, Austin Walker got mouthy on a podcast, and they said, "We're taking that code away."
Who knows? Maybe. I mean, a lot of places didn't get code.
I doubt it.
But,
no. Very few places got code, this was not.
But it would be very funny to me if that's true.
Oh no! Oh, that'd be hysterical.
Even Rockstar got us code eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So Oh, Jesus. All right. We should wrap this thing up. Thank you for listening to us this week. I hope everyone's weekend goes well.
Oh, it's a long one.
Yeah, we had a lot. Remember being excited about Star Wars? That was cool.
Yeah, that was
Great. People should go play that game.
I'm still excited.
Yeah, I'm still excited for Star Wars. I'm excited for that movie. Let's go.
I'm excited for that movie too. When's that out? That's like a few weeks.
End of December.
Okay,
yeah,
a month.
It's a while.
19th or something.
19th? It's pre-Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always see that movie like right before Christmas break and I go home and shit.
I end up seeing it with my family when I'm at Christmas.
Nice.
It was just
Yeah,
nice.
that'll be nice. Well, look forward to Star Wars. Look forward to Pokemon. What are we doing next week? Is anything popping off? I'm probably gonna miss a pod next. Oh, we have a guest podcast next week that I recorded yesterday with Munveer Hare and Rashad Reddick of Brass Lion Entertainment. You might remember Munveer from his previous very, very, very good episode of Waypoint Radio. I forget the number on that one. But we talk about their new company. We talk about making games with black and brown perspectives. We get into some top 5 hip hop shit. If you want me more on my like hip hop podcast mode, I'm in it in that podcast. That'll go up sometime next week, and I'll probably miss one other pod next week, or I don't know what the pod situation will be. We'll see. But what else is there anything out next week that we're going to talk about? I mean, Pokemon, obviously.
Stadia's on Monday.
And Stadia Monday. Cool.
I think Star Wars is like one of the last big ones for.
I think that's true.
I've been getting into the
Episode
Mentalist.
106.
We gotta
You've
talk.
been getting the Mentalist. Pause.
Stop.
Talk to me.
I'm
No, you have to sit here. You like the Mentalist? Are you digging the Mentalist?
First season's pretty rough, and in some
is.
ways, it's like your form of a CBS like crime procedural.
It is, and I get why people
there
thought
is-
that it was not as good as like Psych out the gate, even though I don't like Psych.
But there's
as
a
much.
misanthropic bleakness at its heart, which I
it
identify
is.
strongly with.
Rob,
A
just wait
sense that
until
Patrick Jane realizes there's no honesty in men. There is a falseness to all things and all
Yes.
people.
Yes.
And
In
all
this
the
way,
sentimentality
the
curls a little bit.
Yes, the Mentalist is the inheritor of the California hard-boiled detective story.
Son of a bitch.
Let me tell you, Rob, this thing gets inner what's the word I'm looking for? Organizational. Like you start getting the local police, then you get the California Bureau of Investigations, then you get the feds on top of that, and then you mix some sheriffs in. It's good. It's good. Get ready.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so
Lots
like,
of-
so like draw the line. Like
I'm gonna go eat
Hammett,
lunch. You guys keep talking
McDonald's.
about the Mentalist.
Yeah. Okay,
Mentalist.
bye, Patrick.
Interesting.
Patrick Klepek on Twitter or whatever. Yeah.
All right, we'll get into it.
We're
It'll
going to
be
do it in the
Waypoints.
future. We're going
get
to
into it.
Waypoints. I love The Mentalist. The Mentalist pulled me out of a dark place. Shout outs, as always, to Bowen Flanagan. She's a track Missed You off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOE. Patrick left. By the way, he's gone. I'm looking at an empty chair. You can find me on Twitter at Austin_Walker. You can find everything Waypoint does. Twitter.com/Waypoint. Waypoint.vice.com. Facebook.com/WaypointVice.
Rate and review us on iTunes.
Rate and review us on iTunes.
Thank
Cado,
you.
where can people
Thank
find you on Twitter?
At A_Cado_appears.
Rob, how about you?
At Rob Zachney.
I don't know why I went down here. I'm doing a bunch of voices suddenly. I'm punchy. We should get some food.
Hell yeah.
Because this is like me being lightheaded.
Oh no.
Like, man, I didn't eat dinner last night. I fucked
There's like
up.
a Defara's near you, right?
There is. It's not the Defara, but it's
I know
like
it's not the Defara, but I had a slice that was really good.
It's all right. It's pretty
a good
fucking good.
Defara.
That place opened up a new burger spot.
Yeah.
That burger spot.
They had a mustard sauce. I
They
was
have
like,
a
what
mustard
the?
sauce.
Oh my god.
And both Cado and I were like, do we do the mustard? Like the default was a mustard sauce. And you go to a place that has the guts to be like, oh yeah, we've just put a mustard sauce on the burger. That's the default. But yeah, give it a shot.
Give yourself
good.
over.
Give yourself over.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, 100%. Rob, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Rob Zachney.
There it is. We'll be back next week with more. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Fuck capitalism. Go home.
Binge The Mentalist.
Binge The Mentalist. Is it on?
ready for
Are
that
you give
Waypoint.
DVDs or do you?
It's on Prime now.
Oh, it's on Prime now.
Yeah, so I was just like, my back was hurt, and I was like, I just need to veg out for
It's
hours.
a very good one of
and
those.
like, boom.
Yeah, it will.
There
It
it was.
will. It goes some places. It is a CBS procedural.
Yeah.
for sure. Like it is that model. But I think it ends up being like a deeply. There are some things there that really really work for me.
Also, like the bookings they get for actors putting in special appearances for guest spots is like incredible.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Fucking everybody who like has become a lead in a major series like in the last 5 years, or anyone who was like a major lead in a series that predates The Mentalist by like 5 years. Everybody goes through that show.
Everyone goes through it. You got to go through The Mentalist to make it big.
Oh shit!
What's up?
I went to go look for the Expanse that comes back.
I have to catch up on The Expanse. Ugh.
Yeah,
It does?
It's,
Fucking yes.
according to Google,
it's
it says
like a big drop, right?
December 13th. December 13th, 2019.
Oh man, gives me like 5 days to watch all of it.
Recording.
I didn't hit the record button.
That's important. Y'all ready?
John Carmack retires from Oculus.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like the Oculus thing is falling apart.
Yep. A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Kind of seems like VR is falling
A
apart.
little bit. Yeah. Y'all want to do 53 seconds?
Sure.
All right.
Motherboard wrote about that.
What, the John Carmack thing? Or VR falling apart?
Doom's co-creator John Carmack says he's working on a general AI from home.
Yeah.
Dawn, this is the head they went with. Doom co-creator John Carmack thinks he can start the AI apocalypse in his garage.
Don't make general AIs. Don't do it. It's dangerous. All right.
If anyone's gonna do it,
John Carmack. Yeah.
You can see like you look at a photo of Carmack, like that guy could be in a Terminator movie. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
It's not that he didn't know what he was creating. It's just that he didn't really care, and he thought it was going to be really.
No, he's
interesting.
indifferent. He's like, we did it.
Yeah.
Now take me away, robot.
Wait, Rob? Your
Yeah.
camera's not working.
Oh,
I don't know if that's on purpose or not.
no, it's just a lacuna.
Laguna?
Matata.
All right.
Nope. Your mic sounds better, but your face is still absent. All right. Ready?
Yeah,
There we
I'm
go.
ready.
I need that.
I'm ready. Let's
That's what I
fucking
needed.
go.
That's what I needed.
Burn Pokemon to the ground.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
Lock the account.